Welcome to Self-Perfected.
Okay. Never.
All right,
You got the.
We're on. We're in the Matrix.
You want
Okay.
to do the song, or should Cameron just
Jacked in.
sing? Should Cameron just sing a cappella? Drop a one in the chat if Cameron should sing a cappella, the self-perfected theme
We'll,
song.
we'll sort that out later. If we missed the intro on one episode, I'm sure no one's going to complain.
They stopped listening to the podcast because of them. Like, you guys are so unprofessional.
We're streaming live on YouTube because we couldn't figure out how to get it to work on Facebook this time. I don't know why, what's going on, but
Facebook clamping down.
Yeah.
Facebook groups.
Yeah.
You can't
I'm
stream
gonna-
into them now.
Mitch, I'm
All
going
right.
to put this in the chat so that you can send that to
On it.
whomever. There you go.
this episode will be called Technical Difficult.
Wow.
Wow.
What a great name, Cam. How'd you come up with that?
It's brilliant, man.
That's what happens when you have three kids.
I'm a divergent thinker.
When you have three kids, your dad jokes are just get to the level of special. That's what I call
That
it.
wasn't a dad joke.
That wasn't.
That was just the observation of reality.
That was a special.
Maybe in Mitch's next level dad mind, it somehow was a dad joke.
And it was a special one. It was like
It was really good.
like
When
special.
we're at
ed.
that level, we'll know.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
But
man,
until then,
got so many things we could talk about today. I want to start with just like the most obvious one. Well, I don't know if it's obvious, but did you guys see my text about the campus riots or not riots, protests and stuff about Palestine stuff?
Oh, now you're calling them riots too? They gotcha. They gotcha.
It's working. No, but did you see I mean, I know you guys saw my text about it, but I was like, hey, this is gonna spread. And then like 2 days later, it's like fucking everywhere, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I mean,
tell for the people who haven't heard about it, Cameron, give them the quick download on it.
Well, okay. Do you guys remember back kind of at the beginning after October 7th of like when there was a lot of attention being placed on Israel Palestine again?
Yeah.
There was like these protests in different cities that was like pro-Palestine, and the media was saying, oh, they're pro
supporters
and stuff like that. Yeah, and they were trying to smear it, and then kind of like you just didn't hear about it anymore for a while. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
I'm sure maybe in the background or something, but it was kind of like, all right. And I don't know, maybe they did die down, but and then a couple weeks ago, although maybe it's been happening for a while, but I became aware of it a couple weeks ago of there was there was a thing at I think it was originally Vanderbilt and then one at Columbia. And they basically doing this encampment where they're like putting up tents and then sitting in the tents and then like doing, it's like a sit-in kind of protest where they're just hanging out there all day. And then they're like having teachers come and do their lectures on like the grass or whatever. And then they're like doing chanting and vigils and doing lectures and stuff. It's basically just like hanging out in tents and stuff, right? So and then it started getting attention, and then you started getting these things saying like it was anti-Semitic and that Jewish students were feeling unsafe on campus, right? And then that started to become like this reasoning as to why they needed to kind of like tamp it down. And then police started being sent in, and some of it was like under the excuse, not per se of like there's an actual danger, which I mean, if somebody got hurt, they would just obviously send them in if there was like an actual threat.
Yeah.
No questions asked, they're criminals, right? But they used the excuse of like the tents weren't allowed or something, and I guess because that's what's allowing them to basically stay there full time. So then they said you have to remove the tents, and they didn't want to do that, and so they called in police and like arrested people. And then what's been going on is slowly but surely it's been spreading like in like University of Indiana or something. I'm probably not getting the exact
Yeah,
name.
there's a bunch even here in the main one in Minnesota.
In Pennsylvania, in California, at University of Texas,
Nice.
and a bunch of places. It's starting to spread like crazy. And then I even saw like in Paris, students were like blocking streets in Paris, and like, it's and that's what I was saying. Like I can kind of see it already starting to build, primarily because of the pushback on it. Like suddenly, like all the smear jobs of it being anti-Semitic, right?
That reminds me of I was just seeing one of the laws that are written for the anti-Semitism laws is about them being able to call like a special meeting in order to I guess how should we deal with this anti-Semitism? So we can call it it's called a task force. That's what it was.
Right. It was
They
like
could call it
establish
task
a
force.
task force to figure out how to deal with this kind of stuff, right?
Right, which makes a lot of sense in this context because it's like, oh, what do we do? Let's call a task force and let's
Well,
brainstorm how do
isn't
we
it
combat
isn't it
this?
interesting this whole point about, oh, there was this rise of anti-Semitism in universities, and then they passed all these laws we were talking about last time, I think,
Yeah.
or at least a few times back, right? And that guy
Hmm.
Anomaly's been talking about it a lot for like the past few years.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
these things have been going on, like where they're putting all these the points in place where you're not allowed to say certain things in college campuses.
Yeah.
That's then considered anti-Semitic. And then now these protests are becoming big, and then they're calling them anti-Semitic. And so it's what's the timing of that is very interesting. You
Very.
know? So it's fascinating because, I mean, I'm not supporting protesting. It's pointless. It is pointless. And you can see it's always going to end in people getting hurt. It's
I mean,
never going
just
to
look at the word task force, right? That's what we talk about all the time. Like force is not the way. Force won't work. It can't work.
um and they talk about the protests in the 60s again, or the 80s rather, against like apartheid, and like, yeah, did that really have an effect? I don't think so. Like in fact, if you look into that whole thing with apartheid, like the country went to major shit even after apartheid was lifted.
Hmm.
You put all the people in charge who didn't really know what to do and who were super corrupt, and it was just business as usual, actually. So now it's
Yeah.
just a person with white skin in charge, a person with black skin in charge. It didn't change their level of corruption, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I've been to South Africa.
Yeah.
There's still like extreme poverty and shit. So it's just like, you could say, well, that's because we had apartheid, whatever. Like, I'm just saying, like, you could argue like, oh, the protesting, it stopped apartheid. It didn't solve anything.
Right.
Um, but anyways, it's just interesting to me. What's more interesting about it is seeing, because I'm watching so many videos, like live streams of the actual protesting and like people talking about it on both sides, and like it's very reminiscent of like the COVID stuff, where you hear somebody saying something
Mhm.
versus you can see the reality of it, and you're
Yeah.
like, all right, you're bullshitting, like you're full of shit here, right? um and so that's what's more interesting to me, is just the level of propaganda about it, right? And then when they're saying it's anti-Semitic, what a person imagines when they hear that
Yeah.
is what?
It's like they're hating Jews.
Yeah, like kill Jews, like they're saying all this negative stuff about Jewish people, but they're not. Like, I mean, they're like, they kicked one guy out because he was carrying around a Nazi flag or something like that. But do you think that person was serious? Like, or they there to fuck around? Like, that you're gonna have
Yeah.
now, if there was all Nazi flags, I'd be like, okay, clearly that's their agenda, right? But it's like one person comes in there after it's already gotten popular. You know what I mean? Like, clearly that's not what's going on. Like, it's mostly a bunch of kids and professors like saying, we don't like what's happening with Palestine. We feel like they're being oppressed. We feel like our money is going towards funding Israel to be able to drop bombs and do all the stuff that they're doing and stuff, and we don't like that. Um, and uh,
It's interesting because whenever I see something that's like somebody pro Hamas said something like crazy, like, oh, death to America or something like that. Whenever I see something like that, or it really reminds me of with like BLM riots or with the um Trump protesters, whatever they were doing, where there would be people who would then just go and randomly like break windows of,
yeah, no, yeah, I
nearby
just,
shops. And you're like, that's not what the average person is doing. That's like some sort of agent in there, like just fucking shit up just for the sake of it and to make it like, like somebody's paying this person to be there and do that shit.
yeah.
That's what it comes off as to me.
Fucking George Soros.
And even like with the Black Lives Matter stuff, that was definitely hijacked as well to a large
That's what I'm
degree.
saying. That's what I'm
Like,
saying.
yeah, I mean, because even the group Black Lives Matter, like the official group, hijacked it, because the original point was, whether it's really valid or not, I'm the problem with even that thing is like this idea that like, oh, black people are killed by the police disproportionately to others. It's like you look into the data of it and you're like,
You know,
is it a racist point, or is it a unequal education, unequal system? Like,
and the media like inflaming it.
well, yeah, and then it's like turning it into racism so it can't be solved.
You know, it's funny
If we
is
just assume it's racist, then the only solution is to either kill all the racists or somehow brainwash them to not be racist. If it's actually just unequal education, the solution is give everybody access to effective education, change the system. You see, so
right.
when you make it about racism, it's like, but then you go into Black Lives Matter website, like the official group, right?
Hmm.
And then they're all about decentering men, like
Yeah,
getting rid of the
dismantle.
nuclear family. It was like
Exactly.
clearly a Marxist group,
Right.
which like the average person out there protesting for Black Lives Matter probably didn't even know any of that.
Right.
But also, the average person out there was probably just out there because it was like, remember COVID and all this stuff.
They've been locked
Get
down for
out.
a
Yeah, it
year.
was like a thing to do. So
Hey,
all of that, the system took advantage of all of that. So
listen, you're allowed to go outside and gather in large groups. I'm in. I'm in. Wait, hang on, wait.
but then
Uh,
you look at what was the media portraying it as. Oh, it
yeah,
was fine. It was actually good. It was peaceful.
yeah,
Even though with your own eyes you could see, like with there in Minnesota, remember like they burned down that police precinct and shit. You know what I mean? Like they were like, it was crazy, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely not
like there was
peaceful. There were
actually
peaceful
real.
parts, we'll say, but
So it's like you look at the media and you see the opposite being presented, right? Why
that
is
would be like I have a mostly peaceful cancer. Like,
right. Well, it okay. So I looked up that quote, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. People are
yeah,
like, oh, Churchill said it, right? Apparently, it goes back to Machiavelli. But that's like the classic way that the system will jump on these things. It's like there'll be some crisis, whether it's engineered or it is just, a an outcome of the fact that we've been bullshitting ourselves for thousands of years. Um, but then the crisis pops up, and then of course, what happens is
yeah,
this
I
that
media.
saw this thing from Yuval Noah Harari where he was saying like the problem with conspiracy theories is it makes it seem like a few people can be so perfectly in control of things, and he's like
Mhm,
that's never how history works.
mhm.
Of course, he has some bullshit ideas about history, but the idea like it's funny because I agree with that, but at the same time, it kind of almost dismisses it like no one's actually trying to do that.
Yeah,
So I think the problem with it is that people are like, oh yeah, there's no conspiracies. And it's like, well, clearly there are. Like the World Economic Forum is clearly trying to fucking engineer society.
they're
Now,
conspiring.
are they actually in total 100% control of all outcomes? No. And that's why we are always saying it's not going to work.
Mhm.
But you can have a conspiracy, but also realize that ultimately, so the actual problem with conspiracy theories is when the person just sits there and all they do is post on Facebook, fuck Justin Trudeau, fuck Klaus Schwab, fuck this person. Like, oh, these people are evil. And like, they're just like, it's just me just saying, fuck them. It's the same as protesting. And you're just thinking that person's actually in charge. So then you're just disempowered.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's different than seeing, hey, these people are actually working together in a way that's not to the benefit of everybody. And they
yeah.
shouldn't be allowed to do that. Or there has to be a solution to it or something, right? So,
Hey, it's almost like we should have our own fucking Davos and be our own powerful people,
man, dude, what if we had a Davos and it was like in 30 days and it was in
dude.
like on a private island,
And
like
like
Key Biscayne,
everyone
Florida?
remember to book their hotel this week too, because it's really important that they do that to get the discount.
Yes.
Oh, oh yeah, guys.
Oh,
Enter the
by the
one
way,
percent is next month.
Oh, okay, all right.
Holy
I
shit!
was getting
we're
excited.
talking
I was
about a
like,
real thing.
I want to
I'm
go to
gonna be
that
there in
thing.
30 days. Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to
And
get your
actually, everyone, get your fucking hotel because like they're 95% booked out. So get it today.
I mean, there's like Harvard kids sitting there instead of studying for finals. There's kids from Harvard. They're sitting out camping out in tents. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
so you
what
could
no,
do that if
where
you
was
want.
yeah, I mean that's an option. Enter the 99% by doing that.
Right.
Um or no, what was it? There was it Columbia? One of the
Hmm.
schools that they like canceled school now and are telling them they have to go home and basically do like online education.
Everything's
Y'all see
online at the moment. Yeah.
that? And is it like 70 grand a year?
But look
Yeah,
at why they're doing that because they don't want it just to keep growing and growing and growing. Because then what happens is the kids they're there, they're just like, hey, let me just show up what's going on here. And then suddenly like it becomes more even the people who don't care about the issue, it's like suddenly it just grows and grows.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was going to bring another point I was talking about with Katie. I thought it was a really interesting perspective of like, if we, that point you said, like, don't let a good crisis go to waste. It's like, there's something going on. Yeah. There's the Palestine stuff. Yeah. These kids, they care about it. The professors care about it, whatever. But look at the bigger picture of it. Like, um, man, this is Katie's theory, so I have to give her credit, but it makes a lot of sense. Like, imagine you're the university and it's like, you could just say, well, we can't, what is the point? It's like, okay, let's say a hurricane blows through and destroys the university.
Mhm.
What would they do?
Oh, well, they'd have to go online.
But I mean, like, what would they do? Wouldn't they have like insurance or something? And they would
Oh, for
like,
sure. Yeah.
so it's like at a certain level, that's perhaps what's going on, where it's like, oh, we have to cancel classes and like everyone wants their tuition back. So like we need like to, you know what I mean? It's like a way of the university just trying to like, it's like if a hurricane blew through your area, but your house didn't get damaged, but because you were in the zone, you were like, oh, yeah, I guess I should take some of that money and I can like build something on my property or whatever. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like there's some level at which it's like the universities are falling apart. And it's
Hmm.
like they can utilize this to be like, see, look, there's this terrible event happening on campus and we have to shut down and now we can't pay our teachers and this and that and so forth. Right. And
Yeah.
and you know, the other point too that I see within it is like, um there was this point where, okay, the students were saying they're upset because people are trying to make this about free speech on campuses, because
Hmm.
they're like, this is really about Palestine. But then when you talk to a lot of the professors or you hear them, they're like saying it's about free speech. So they're like, we're not against what they're saying, the students, but we're here to make sure that their free speech is protected. And then I was listening to someone else and they were saying that this is some kind of coordinated attempt. Maybe it's not totally a conspiracy type coordinated attempt, but it's like an attempt to like delegitimize the universities,
Hmm.
right? So I'm just putting all these little pieces together, and it's like, I think what we're seeing at some level is perhaps the beginning of the total collapse of the university system.
I could see the collapse of the university system. I see like in you know, during the COVID lockdowns, it was basically like, okay, you got sent home, you did your degree
Well, dude,
online.
there's no way they don't see it coming. The fucking AI thing. So all
Oh, for
these kids are
sure.
what gonna go drop 50 grand a year to go to get some bullshit degree. That's
Yeah.
not gonna be able to get them a job.
Yeah.
But this is kind of what makes the other elements of like, it makes sense that the universities would have a benefit for these
Yeah.
things to happen, because it's like, well, we are falling apart. Our attendance is going to go down. But if we can capitalize on this as like, oh, these events are happening, and maybe that can be a way of like extracting more resources somehow out of the system, out of it, right? That's
Mhm.
not the only point, right? But I'm just saying it all kind of is like an indication of like where things are going. Because it's like, do you have free speech on a university? Well, what if all the students, like, think about this. Don't you think at some level these kids at Harvard and Columbia, like you were just saying, Mitch, they know what's coming with AI?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
imagine you're sitting there, you're a kid at Columbia, you're in your second or third or maybe fourth year, and you're like, I'm not going to have a job probably when I get out. Maybe at a subconscious level, you know this. So
Yeah.
it's like, let me just fucking fuck shit up. Like, maybe
I
not in
mean,
a conscious way.
I can still remember being in high school and having that same mindset of just like angst, pissed at the system, like this is not what I want to do. Fuck this. Plus, you mix some alcohol and weed with that, so your like inhibitions are down. And I'm sure, fucking tons of these college kids, right? I mean, there are so many kids in college that just drinking is so part of the culture too, where it's like all these different forces are at play. So then it's like, oh, cool, an outlet where I can fucking get my energy out. Fuck yeah.
Like, maybe I don't even know who's necessarily behind the protest, right? Maybe it's the college kids, maybe it's someone else suggesting them to do it, but somebody at some level knows what the consequence of this is going to be. Like, do they really think that the universities are going to be like, okay, we'll meet your demands? Their demands are that they disclose where all of their investments are going to. The university, have these funds, right? Like places
Endowments.
like, yeah, they have
Yeah,
endowments, right? And then
yeah.
they invest those funds, right? Just like a hedge fund would, right? So they're like, we want you to disclose where it's all going. We want you to divest from any investments you have that are in any way supporting companies that benefit from the apartheid in Israel. Right. And then their third point that I've seen is that they want them to stop doing any disciplinary action on the students who have been punished for doing any of the protesting, because they've been like, a lot of them have been suspended and kicked out and stuff. Um, so like imagine you're a school, imagine you're behind the protest. Don't you kind of know that that's not something they're going to do?
Yeah,
It's
obviously.
going to create this friction and this conflict,
Right.
which to
It's
me,
like taking a
it's
stand
like
in a
you're kicking
sense.
at the foundations of a building, and eventually, if you do it long enough, the fucking thing's going to come down. You know what I mean? Like we're talking like Columbia, we're talking
Yeah.
Harvard, Vanderbilt, like major, like they're it's like kicking at the credibility of it, and this is to the students' own detriment,
Yeah.
because they're ruining the reputation of their own degree that they spent their whole life probably fantasizing about going to these schools. Their parents probably did too. I know, because I went to a school that's at that same level of prestige. I know, like, like that whole story when Bill Gates, like when he like quits Harvard and his parents are like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you're crazy. You were there at Harvard, right?
Yeah.
So imagine you're these kids at Columbia and you're just like destroying the whole thing. I mean, it's not that I know for sure. It's just like I can see where it's going.
No,
I'm
this
just
is like one of those this goes in the prediction
you,
bucket,
you could
just
just
like
see it. Like this
all
is
the
the
other
beginning
stuff.
of the collapse of all this stuff. There's going to be, and then also under the surface, you have all these laws being passed that are restricting your speech on these campuses. Like, why can't you say whatever? I'm not saying you should be. I'm just saying, according to our values of free speech in America, why shouldn't you be allowed to say any of the things that are being said? They're like, well, it's about you're hating people of Jew. Like, why can't you say that? What,
yeah.
like, but at the same time, we know it's all a big fucking game. Like, think about it. You go into corporate America. Can you say whatever you want?
No,
Fuck
definitely not.
no.
But isn't the whole point of being at these universities to go into corporate America? And you want to pretend like, oh, it's all about free speech. But as soon as I'm done, oh, free speech is over.
Right. Yeah.
These are the people who are going to go run Facebook and Twitter and, you know what I mean? Like all these different things. And then
Yeah.
they're arguing about free speech here, but then they're going to go over here. And don't you think it's these same fucking kids who are like, if they went to go work for Twitter, they'd be censoring every fucking person on the internet of every view they don't like?
100%.
I think
Yeah.
crying about free speech, and I'm not trying to make it like, oh, they're just whining. It's just like, but they're also not making it about free speech. Somebody else's, like, there's an agenda to be like, this is all about free speech on campuses. When if you look at the protest there, it's not like, it's not about it. The only reason it's getting attention is because it has to do with the Israel Palestine, which has to do with war funding and just so many different points, right?
Yeah. What's interesting about that is like in the 60s, you could make the point that on campus, like that's where you would have free speech. You could be really radical. Like that's where things were happening. Like where, the whole reason why you would want to go to university was because that's where, the big ideas were coming out of in America at that time, right? You could make that point for that, or at least there
Which I think
was.
is a myth,
Yeah,
but
there was a
people do
narrative
think
of
that,
that is what I was going
yeah.
to say. Exactly. Because like even when you hear about like Steve Jobs, like he was going on campus. He was not actually attending school or like trying to get a degree, but he was auditing classes and like he was there arguing with professors that he
I
didn't.
mean, it's the place where most sort of higher level vocabulary young people are at.
Right. And so this whole point with like, okay, so now it's about free speech, but we've known that for years it's been about this woke culture where it's the place where you send your kids and now they have a completely different worldview where like this is the line that's sort of been um I guess it in a way it's one of the layers where it's been spreading this idea of Marxism throughout the states, spreading this idea of this racial inequality because people are taking gender studies or whatever class they're
Where you're
taking.
getting exposed to a lot of this. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so and then these people with degrees, they're like, well, I'm an authority now because I went and got this university degree and I say you can't say this about women or trans women or whatever, right? And so and then those are the people who go on to Twitter or wherever they go and they censor everybody else. And so it's interesting now because it's like that whole thing has been being exposed for some years now of like, hey, what's actually going on college campuses? But for the vast majority of people, they're still sending their kids to college, or at least, educated people, they're
Yeah.
still doing that. And now it's coming to the point where we're seeing with AI, and I think a lot of people right now, even the people who are aware, yeah, AI is like totally disrupting everything. They don't know what else to do, so they're still putting their kids through that system. That's what I've noticed with a lot of parents. It's like, okay, but you just pull my kid out of school, but then what would I do? And it's this interesting point of like John Taylor Gatto makes this point in one of his speeches, but he talks about how, in the 1800s, prior to school becoming this mandatory thing, compulsory in Massachusetts, the literacy rate there was 98%, right? And then it took them decades, literally decades, once they said, hey, school is now mandatory, it took them decades to force everybody in the state of Massachusetts to send their kids to school. And they had to force them by militia and under armed guard marching their kids to school. Parents were that against it, right? And after that, literacy rates never exceeded over 91%. And I'm sure it's lower now too. But the point being, he makes this point of in that time of people going to school, there was no problem with getting your child to read or to write or to learn math or anything like that. But we live in a different time now. And so you couldn't just say, and he makes this point, which I think a lot of people miss. You couldn't just say, oh, just pull your kid out of school and they're going to learn all those things. Because the parents of today
Right.
don't know how to
Yeah.
teach those things. Like
Right.
they're not as confident. They're not aware that we don't live in the same times. Parents today have been indoctrinated by schools, by the media, by all these different things. And so it's like, yeah, obviously school is screwing all this up, but the reaction of, well, just pull your kid out of school and then everything will be fine, that's not right either. And he makes that point really clearly. And I think a lot of people miss that when they're actually they get into like the yeah, school is terrible. And they're just like, just pull my kid out of school and just let them sit around
Well,
and they'll figure it out.
so this reminds me a lot of in the process, right, where you do the self-forgiveness and then the self-realization and self-corrective application. It's like you start to become aware of when you're doing something fucked up. But it's like us collectively as society. It's like the parents are like, oh well, I know school's kind of bad, but they just go with the automated system, as opposed to like taking that moment and actually going, okay, wait, hold on, and then doing the. I mean, obviously they don't know self-forgiveness, right? It's on us to share that, but it's the same thing. It's like you'll have these automated patterns that are obviously fucked, and now it's becoming more obvious, but people don't have the vocabulary set to be able to then take that automated pattern, see it for what it is, forgive it, realize the best course of action, and then commit yourself to that and then live that. But it's like that's all of us on an individual level needing to do that, right? How often do we still at times, right? You're like pissed about something and you're like, oh, this is not best to be pissed about it. That's what this process is, though. Then you catch yourself, do the forgiveness, do the correction, and you get really good at that. Then that becomes automated, right? It becomes automated to correct yourself. But that's this is like the lifeboat, and everyone's on the fucking Titanic. We're like, hey guys, come on the lifeboat.
What's interesting, as you were talking about that, because I recently watched, you guys did too, the movie They Live, right? And it's such a good movie. It's so relevant to today, you know? But I was just noticing this point of like this point of they use this point specifically, and it's so good of how we all want to make a profit, right? Like how everybody is in this like survival mode and it's just all about like, you know, make money however you can. And so you're willing to sell out your own people or willing to, just go along with the system because you're trying to, it's like I was talking about this recently with some folks at my clubhouse of just this point of everybody wants Cam, I don't know if you remember this. You ever see like interviews where Europeans specifically will interview Americans, right? And this used to be, I remember seeing this a lot actually in the early 2000s, but um, they would always say something to the effect of, you Americans will allow your politicians to do whatever, or allow your corporations and businesses to do whatever, because even though you're not rich, you want to be rich and you believe that you could one day be rich. And it would be leveled as like a criticism towards Americans specifically. And the
Yeah.
Europeans would say it all the time, like, so you can't see that there are these problems and these problems. Um, but the reality is, everyone wants to be rich. And so everyone's allowing
The,
this
the
society.
Europeans are like, look, I know I can't be because the system's fucked, so I'm just gonna let my king be rich, you know. And you're like,
Exactly, right?
okay, I'm just
Right.
giving up.
But exactly. But it's this whole point of like, you want to be rich, so you're allowing the person that you see in the position that you actually want to be in to abuse, because you're like, because you know deep down,
Maybe that could be me someday, even from a fantasy level. Yeah,
right,
sure.
right, and you want to be the abuser. And maybe you don't think of it that way. Of course, you probably don't think of it that way. You're like, ah, I wouldn't be an abuser. I'd be great. But I just want to be in the position where nobody's going to question what I'm doing, where people will give me the free pass. We do it all day, every day. We do it all day, every day. Like, just it's society in general, right? Of like, well, I don't want to tell you how to live your life. Why? Because you don't want anybody telling you how to live your life, right? It's this point of,
Hold on. Even someone says, "Oh no, I don't. I'm not rich. I just have a normal job. I'll never be rich. I'm not trying to be rich, right?" So it doesn't apply to me. It's like, but you want to go to heaven, right? So isn't that the same as saying you want to be rich at some point? You're just like, it's just not possible on this earth. So you're kind of like the European, right? But you're still thinking like at some time you'll get that.
Yeah,
And like we've talked about
the
many
positive.
times, that's what allows all the shit to occur. Cause you're like, well, because if you weren't thinking like that, you wouldn't allow a lot of stuff.
right.
And then the other point too is like there's nothing wrong per se with wanting to be rich. It's just realizing like you have to create a system where everybody has that. It's not even has the opportunity because that's where people hide behind. Well, everyone has the opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
No, they don't because you don't have an equal education. If everyone had an equal education, everyone would have the opportunity, but we would also work together in ways that we're not right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we're
That
still
is the
dealing with the
creation of the
fact,
new.
yeah, we're still dealing with the fact that there's like religious wars,
Right.
which is insane. Like I was watching this I found this podcast, I sent it to you guys, but there's these two guys who live in Israel.
Mm.
And it was cool listening to them talk because at the end of all of it, because the one guy was just like, you could tell he was very depressed. And they were just both like, we're living in this society in Israel and we're seeing what is happening. And they're like, and there is nothing we can do about it. Like we're talking about it, right? But there's literally nothing we can do to stop it. And
Mm.
you could just see like, and at the end of it, it was cool because I watched the whole thing. It was like an hour and a half, and they were like, you know, essentially saying like this, they said it comes down to the fact that people are brainwashed. That there was like a few points he mentioned, right? And he was like, oh, because he was like, the only reason I'm not going insane is because I believe deep down that people are good. Most people actually want to be good and do what is good. And he said, but they're either brainwashed or they are brainwashed. There's all this
I
propaganda,
gotta invite him to the group.
right? Well, and then he said, and then there's a system, right? And he says that hasn't changed. Like that system has to change, right? So it's cool. I put a comment about that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Because
always tag self-perfected and
that's
like
why
I
I
know.
sent that's why I sent it to you guys because I was like, look, again, this is a perfect example of what I've been trying to say. They're in Israel,
Yeah.
where it's a very extreme example. Like not everyone care, and they said like some people they see it happening and they're like it's fine, like it has to be done. Like they're not being self honest at all. These guys are starting to be self honest about it, and like they feel really bad because they're like, holy fuck, this is the reality we're in. Everyone else seems like they're having a great life and everything's positive because they're just ignoring reality.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
so these guys are starting to face it, and because of that, they're starting to realize like we have to change the system.
Yeah.
Self-perfected.
Right now, what is that? Like they don't know how to do. You can see clearly they don't know what the context of that is, because they also like, well, the problem is like these cults, like they mean like religious cults because they see everything as like a cult, right? And the problem with that word cult is what happens is then a person goes, well, you can't work together in a group now.
Right.
You can't have a common. And it's so cool because I really look at that criticism people have of what we do as, is it a cult? And it's like, let's look at the point of, okay, we have a common set of principles. Are there any rules? There's
No.
nothing within anything that we're saying or the material or anything that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like there was this one episode where they were interviewing this guy who came from Texas and grew up like in a Christian Zionist family.
Mhm.
And he said like in their community it was very cult like Christian Zionist, like, and they believe this whole thing about like the rapture, like they're hardcore that whole story of like the rapture and the antichrist and the period of tribulation and people, and all that whole thing, and like all the Jews will return to Israel, and that will start the whole process. And then like 2/3 of the Earth's population is going to be decimated in the tribulation, and 1/3 will remain, and they have to accept Jesus as the savior when he comes back. And all like they hardcore, like they believe it is an inevitability. It is going to happen. It's not like they have to believe it and make it happen. It's like it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like it's coming. Like it's kind of like the storm is coming. You can see it on the radar or whatever. Like you got to like get prepared. It's not like I have to go do something to make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And so they were like, so I can see this point in people's minds of like, oh, I don't want to be in a cult and have to believe something that's like, bullshit or whatever, right? And it was cool because I'll just mention this point briefly. Like with Max, for example, he was reading these books by Yuval Noah Harari, right? They came in the
Mhm.
mail, like one of his relatives sent them. And by the time we even realized he had the books, he already read them twice, like these 200-page books, right? The 2 volume set about history. And like, it's basically his watered down kids version of like Sapiens and
Mhm.
Homo Deus and all that, right? And it's interesting because the beginning of it is, okay, let's go back to 200,000 years ago, whatever, when there was Homo erectus or whatever, you know what I mean? And then it became Homo sapiens. And that's the beginning of all civilization.
And then it became Homo perfectus.
Then it
Well, no,
became, well,
then
no,
it
it
just
became
became Homo.
homosexual for him.
Right.
Somehow that, kept procreating.
See, but I was really
I
looking
still
at
don't
this.
understand that part.
Gian made this brilliant point the other day when we were talking about it. And he was like, the guy wrote the whole book to justify why he's gay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah. Yeah.
seemed maybe for some people like they couldn't process that, but it's true. Like, because, okay, if you go, because at the end of the book it's all about like how like being gay, it's like these kids had to fight for the ability to go to prom together, and then all that, and it was like literally end of the book, the second to last chapter was about gay rights. And then after that it was kind of talking about women's rights, and that Malala girl who like fought for, I don't know,
Why
the
would
right to study gender studies in Afghanistan. I don't know, like whatever. Right. And then now she's like fucking doing a musical with Hillary Clinton.
I'm
Oh, yeah.
just
She
thinking
really understands human rights, right?
I'm just thinking like why would you have to fight to go to prom together? Like you could just go to prom as individuals. That's-
Well, the boys love the boys, right? So it's so interesting because we look at it. Okay, then I watched this video, like I showed you guys, like this video of you. I keep saying Noah Yuval, but it's Yuval Noah Harari, of him talking about this guy was interviewing him. Like, did you being gay influence your scientific research? And he was saying yes, because
Mm.
it like showed him that what people believe is true is sometimes just a story, but then if you look at the facts of it, the objective reality, it can show you things that are counter to what you think and you believe according to a story.
Right.
And he used these 2 examples. He said, okay, so his justification as why being gay cannot be argued as something you shouldn't do, that shouldn't be considered just totally normal like anything else, right? And he said, one, there's 2 arguments against it. One is the religious argument. God wrote some books or said some things and said you shouldn't be gay. He's like, but that's just a story. That's bullshit. Okay, fine. Number 2, people say it's not natural. It's not the natural order of things. And if it's not natural, you shouldn't do it. And he makes this point, which I think is a valid point to a certain degree, of like, well, if it's not natural, it couldn't exist.
Right.
Meaning, natural is not this like law that you believe that you can either break or not break. And if you break it, maybe you get in trouble or something. It's like if it's happening, is happening because it's according to the laws of physics.
Yeah, it's interesting because like natural in that context is still following like this religious ideology of like
Right.
natural means by moral law of God.
But it's like using it as like if it's scientific, like it's a
Right.
natural law. Like men copulate with women because that produces babies. So therefore, like naturally, it goes against nature, like as if nature is a being like God or something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And he's like, but that doesn't make sense. He said, because if you look at, for example, our closest genetic relative, chimpanzees, there's homosexual behavior in chimpanzees. And then he says, like, they do it for like forming political alliances, easing tensions. Um, there was like dominant behavior or something. I forget the other
Yeah.
point. It's not just for like procreation, right?
Yeah.
And so I was looking at this point and I'm like, okay, um,
That's probably why he's doing it for political alliance.
Easing
well, it's
tensions
like,
too.
okay, so then why do humans do it?
Political
But that's
alliance.
not the argument.
No, it's not.
It's like,
It's
because
not.
I love this other person.
Right.
Okay, you love them. Like, isn't that just a story?
No, Cameron, it's a feeling. It's very
But
real.
that's a story, isn't it? Like, I
Yeah.
love this person. Like, it's like, no, you're sexually attracted to them. That's not the same thing as love.
You're just
Well,
quibbling.
Cameron. Wow, Cameron. You have no fucking heart, do you?
You see what I'm saying? Like, um, is there, and again, it's kind of like this point where you have to say, like, I don't give it, I don't care if one dude wants to bang another dude.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, that in itself doesn't really, it's like any more than like some guy sitting in his room masturbating changes reality. It this doesn't
Right.
matter. That's not the issue. The issue is when it becomes a point that you're propagandizing people that they need to accept and they need to do it. And the whole point of that is because otherwise we'll hurt people's feelings who are gay and we'll
Yeah.
make them feel like they're not welcome in society. So, what if it's possible though to get rid of the religious point where it's like, you're bad, you're evil, which is stupid. Like, I would never tell my kids they're bad or evil for something that makes no sense. Like, if a kid is abusive to another
Mhm.
kid and they're doing it out of spite or jealousy or blame or something, that's evil. And we'll say that is evil. You shouldn't do that. Like, can you see you're participating in being evil right now? But
Yeah.
not as a point of shame.
Yeah.
It's a point of, this is an example of something where if you do this, can you see what it will create in your reality?
Yeah.
So the problem is we have these stupid code words like love and stuff like that, where it's like you can just hide behind it.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, let's just take a step back. What if everybody was gay?
Hey.
You know what I mean? Like, would our society function? It's like,
Well,
well, but you could still procreate anyways. How many gay people on average that are fully gay also procreate?
I don't think at
I don't
all.
know.
Like,
I
and I'm
don't
not,
think.
you can't count surrogates because someone had to do, now you see, but this is where you go like, oh, well, you could do like artificial insemination and all. It's like you start to get into this fucking weird level where you're going way beyond, like, we're not able to keep up with it because, okay, a mother is a surrogate and then they give this baby to these other people, right? Now that child's not going to be breastfed.
Yeah.
Like, well, we have formula. And it's like, that's not, like, I know if I have a cow and it's born and I immediately just take it day one and give it to somebody else, you know what happens? It will die.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't happen with people per se, but there's certain things that don't work properly, like their immune system gets weakened with
Yeah.
humans. You don't
Yeah.
get the
Yeah. Yeah.
colostrum and stuff. That happens with cows. Like, if they don't get the colostrum in 24 hours, like, you have to have some extra on hand just in case, like, for some reason they don't do it right. So we
Yeah.
can we can use we can use milk bottles and stuff like that for like to help, but then it becomes a point where you're literally just disconnecting things from what is actually the best way currently. That doesn't mean we can't improve it, but it's this sort of forced improvement. Okay. Okay. I'm getting off topic, but let me go back to the point. The only way you can justify all this is if you start back and you go, look, back 200,000 years ago or whatever, we were just like these apes that learned how to speak or something. And like that was the beginning of all civilization.
Right.
And we're just on this path of like evolution. And now it's time for us to take charge and direct this evolution and just try to get better and make more technology and all this stuff. And it's like, what, you're totally discounting the possibility that this isn't the first incarnation of civilization.
Mhm.
It'd be like thinking American civilization is the first empire ever.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know, we're just trying to figure things out. And we're like, dude, we've seen this happen before. Go back to Rome. We've read the books anyways of it collapsing
Yeah.
because of the same shit that's being done now. So we
Yeah.
can't be like, oh, we don't know. So like if you understood Atlantis, for example, and you understood like weapons that have been developed millions of years ago that have destroyed fucking solar systems and shit because of the level of like not considering what is best, you'd be like, oh, that's what we're doing with AI.
Yeah.
It can bring context into your reality that you start to question like what are we doing, because right now we're building AI just based on that point you said earlier, which was like everyone just wants to profit. So it's like I'm not going to stand up and stop this because at some level I can become rich, or maybe, or like I have to allow that right to other people somehow. It's like you're not questioning it, you're literally, but at the end of the day it's just everyone's programmed to be a fucking follower,
It's
really,
also,
because of any conscious point.
well, it's also this point of like wanting to experience that like good feeling, like that energy, the positive feeling, that's you know,
Like when sorry, but like it's like when I watched that interview with Noah Yuval Harari, whatever, Harari, and they're like, and he's like, well, I'm just one of those boys that loves other boys.
mm,
But the example he gave of realizing it was when he would notice when people are walking out the street, a man and a woman, he would always be looking at the man, right? And like that became a clue as to like, even though he wasn't recognizing consciously like what that implied, it was like he was clearly attracted to that. And it's like, what does it have to do with love?
yeah,
And when you really think about it, being gay in that context, aren't you saying you cannot love women?
yeah,
Isn't that what you're saying?
yeah. It's
I
like
do not love women.
I cannot, yeah, I and
Because
I will
if you're
not.
like, well, no, 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 I'm just not sexually attracted to them. Okay.
What's that have to do with love?
Right. So, but I thought your deal over here was you loved this guy.
Right. Well, no,
You're not
actually,
sexually attracted to him. Look, dude, let's just say it's a perversion. Let's say like I like to sniff socks while I masturbate. Go for it. Like that's fun. You know what I mean? Like let's just have a place for you. You can go do that in your shed or something, right? Like you know what I mean? And then when you come out, just be normal with everybody else. Whatever. You know what I'm trying to say? Like if you're some dude and you have kids and you're married and you just have to have gay sex, like I don't know, like maybe there's a way you can figure that out and work it out with your wife or something. I don't know. All I'm trying to say is it's like, why does that preclude a guy who is gay from developing an intimate relationship with a woman and having kids?
Mhm.
Well, I don't love her. That would be the only argument.
Right, yeah,
But then my point is that isn't that what I'm trying to say? Like you can't love a woman?
yeah,
Because then my argument would be when you say, well, I love men, like, no, you don't. That's not real. Love isn't real. You're full of shit. It's just a feeling.
mhm,
Because if you're going to use your feelings to justify a major fucking thing that influences reality in our system and so forth, like we're fucked. Like, do you know what I'm trying to? This is the whole point. Like, we're challenging is this idea that your feelings are the primary point, because there's so many times, even as a parent, a husband, a business person, a friend, whatever, where your feelings are going to get in the way of what is actually best to do.
yeah.
That's
Have
the
you
whole.
read have you
Yeah.
read Homo Deus when he explains how he sees all this?
What do you mean? What are you referring to specifically?
Uh, so the way he looks at feelings is he basically makes this assertion that he's like every single thing is an algorithm and it's all data being processed. That's like his take on it, right? And so what a feeling is part of this algorithm where you're like, okay, for example, right? He's walking down the street and now he notices, ooh, I want to look at the guy instead of the woman. That to him, it's like his human body's a calculator and he can't do anything about it.
Right.
It's like this is just how it is.
Right.
Therefore, I'm going to do this. Therefore, my feelings are valid, and it's all this big algorithm.
Right.
Basically,
But
that's
that's like it completely discounts how your environment plays a role in the way that you think. How
Well,
like
okay, but let's just say it's valid. Take it at face value.
mhm,
Okay, so your algorithmic approach is you feel this way. So let's say a white dude is walking down the street and he looks, he's a black person and fucking hates them because they're black, because his algorithm says they're black. I hate them. So
right,
then why shouldn't he be allowed to live in a way that expresses that?
right, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, how this is my problem with it. It's like, okay, but if you ask this guy, I'm assuming, I can't speak for him, but let's just hypothetical simulation of Yuval Noah Harari. Okay, so racists are totally okay, right? Let them just say whatever the fuck they want, do whatever the fuck they want, and have racist societies and form racist communities and racist schools. Why not?
Yeah.
That
But I
harms people. But then you won't look self honestly at what I'm trying to say as like, if we propagandize people, we're propagandizing people not to be racist.
Mhm,
We are propagandizing people to accept being gay
mhm,
and to, in some way, nudge them into wanting to be gay.
mhm.
It is a nudge, like you, because you all heard about the concept of nudging and stuff. It's an obvious point. It's
Super
like kind of
nudge.
the way propaganda works. Like if you see enough McDonald's commercials, they can nudge you that when you get that hunger and you're on the highway, you see the McDonald's, I'll pull over and I'll get the McDonald's rather than just waiting till I get, like what I do when I get hungry in that context is I go to a grocery store and I'm like, can I get some bananas, some fruit? Like, you know what I mean? I just don't, maybe in one every 100 times it happens, I might get a gas station chips or something. You know what I mean? But like, I don't
Yeah.
want to really eat that shit if I don't have to. You know what I mean?
You know what I do?
But the average person, they're gonna get nudged. They're just gonna, oh, I'll just get some Chick-fil-A.
I just go to Chipotle because
Yeah, exactly. It was just terrible.
no, it's much better than McDonald's.
It's
Have you
probably
ever
better than
had?
McDonald's, even though I think they own it, right?
Yeah, McDonald's. Well, they did own it. I think McDonald's divested from them a couple of years
Oh,
ago.
see, that protest worked.
That's protest.
My bowels protest.
I was protesting
Wait,
so hard. I was like,
what?
no, I
You
don't
can't
want McDonald's.
Hold
digest.
on.
You must
Hold on.
divest. Um,
Mitchell needs to look this up. He's like, they divested? No, why? Why would they? I
See,
don't
but
understand.
it's cool that point you're bringing through, Mitch, because like that is the whole point. It's like, well, my feelings are an algorithm; they're valid, and it's like,
He makes this whole fucking case. He's like bringing in pigs and stuff. It's
oh
crazy.
yeah,
He brings
He
in
says
pigs.
organisms are here. Let me just read like this.
go ahead, go ahead.
Here's two paragraphs on this.
Did you have your pocket copy of Homo Day or the Homo
Well,
Deus?
I found it. I found it like a month ago, and I was starting to read through it. And he has some. See, I like reading these books because I like to see how he speaks about it. He writes with so much authority. It's
I
amazing.
know,
It's like
I
a
know.
masterclass.
Yeah.
Like he has some line about like the pyramids. He's like, he just totally disregards any argument that it could be anything but human ingenuity making the pyramids. I'm like, God damn, that was some
Even the
masterpieces.
reasoning behind why the pyramids were built makes no sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways,
Okay, so says in recent decades, life scientists have demonstrated that emotions are not some mysterious spiritual phenomena that is useful just for writing poetry and composing symphonies. Rather, emotions are biochemical algorithms that are vital for the survival and reproduction of all mammals. What is this? Well, that's funny.
yeah. Oh, now suddenly reproduction. You know.
Okay, hold on. What does this mean? Well, let's begin by explaining what an algorithm is. This is of great importance not only because this key concept will reappear in many of the following chapters, but also because the 21st century will be dominated by algorithms. Algorithm is arguably the single most important concept in our world. If we want to understand our life and our future, we should make every effort to understand what an algorithm is and how algorithms are connected with emotions. An algorithm is a methodical set of steps that can be used to make calculations, resolve problems, and reach decisions. An algorithm isn't a particular calculation, but the method followed when making the calculation. So he basically goes on to say, where is this? He starts talking about baboons, right? So he goes, the baboon's entire body is a calculator. What we call sensations and emotions are in fact algorithms. The baboon feels hunger, he feels fear and trembling at the sight of a lion, and he feels his mouth watering at the sight of bananas. So yeah, I mean, it's just so funny because in his whole fucking argument, he says, in order to transmit genes to the next generation, it is not enough to solve survival problems. Animals also need to solve reproduction problems too, and this depends on calculating probabilities. It's like this
um,
dude is literally arguing,
but isn't it fascinating? Because it's like, okay, if you put all this together, like we've been kind of building these points throughout the podcast, over the episodes, it's like, doesn't it kind of almost sound like he's part of the agenda to make everyone believe that actually you're just a fucking computer?
yes,
Mm,
And
yeah.
exactly,
like, maybe
exactly.
eventually you'll just be a computer, and like that's the next evolution, that's the next step. And like we
So,
were just these little pieces of matter, and or organic matter, and now we need to get evolved into the. He may not be directly saying that, but it's like, doesn't it kind of lead into the whole point?
well, so
For
he
sure.
at the end of the book, he calls it the data flow and dataism. So it's like his question he puts forth is, he says science is converging on an all-encompassing dogma, which says that organisms are algorithms and life is data processing. So he basically makes the equation of saying what life is data processing. Perfect fucking segue to just accept the fucking matrix.
So basically machines can be alive.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. He poses it as a question, but it's like a
So
guided question.
that's also interesting because he's basically saying like you're a calculator, but then can your calculator not be wrong? Like you just always accept
Yeah.
the output of your calculator? Like why?
Hold on, it can't be because it's happening.
It, elaborate on that.
He does not have any, and I'm going to use the term moral because I don't agree with moral, but like use that as a blanket term. He doesn't have any moral compass.
Mhm.
Everything that exists is, it's, think of it as a very like raw, like
So the
it's like
question
yeah.
it implies the question of like, what's the point of building a better computer then? You get what I'm saying? Because if your calculator is never wrong, your computer is never wrong. Like, what's the point
Right.
of
What is
building
it
it?
optimizing for, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly.
It's
What's wrong?
basically just pushing
Or
forth this
pleasure.
current. Yeah, it's
That's
positive
true.
is good, negative is bad.
Yeah,
That is the rules of this fucking system he's
and
accepting.
You see, he's
that's
Because
literally
he's
just the
good.
system,
He's
like
good
fucking
because he can
reinforcing
have
this
his
idea
he
that
can
you're
have his
energy.
gay sex with his partner and he's got a good job and Klaus Schwab funds his fucking bank account. Why fucking change it? Because he's
right,
good. But is he
right.
that kid right now that's being born in fucking Palestine or Israel that's getting
Well, what's so
traumatized?
interesting is he doesn't agree with, he openly says he does not like what Israel is doing. He does not agree with Israel's stance with Palestine. That's what's so fascinating about it.
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
like, so, but um,
He's like a little fucking
how do you
just system
decide? But you know what I think
system
though?
man.
It's like it's part of the bias because it's like, well, Israeli society is very patriarchal and made him feel bad for being gay. So it's easy to be on the side of what they're doing is wrong.
mm.
And I understand he has like a compassion sort of viewpoint. That's why he's also vegan.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like we shouldn't eat animals, right? But it's like, okay, but do plants process data? And his whole thing is, can it experience suffering or not? How do you know if something can experience suffering?
Right.
And I was kind of going to this point the other day when we were talking about it. It's like, um, I watched a big chunk of his interview with Lex Friedman and like just taking notes on like how he was putting points together. And it was like he brought this point of like life. He's equating life with consciousness, which is perfect
Mhm.
because, like you said, it's data processing. This is what I've always said. That's not life. It's consciousness is the data processing. That's
Mhm.
not who you are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like if that were the case, then when you go into a coma, you're not processing that data. You're not conscious anymore. You don't exist anymore. And that's what they would believe.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, but if life is consciousness, okay, and then he made this point because they were talking about what's the problem with AI. Because Lex Friedman was kind of like, well, if AI can say like, hey, I'm experiencing pain or I love you or all these things. And he was kind of like, well, we can't really call it alive because it can't experience suffering.
Mhm.
And it's like, here's the other point. That's what it was. He said he made this point before that because he was going into like the veganism thing, and he said that we cannot prove the consciousness of anyone else except ourselves because for ourselves it is self-evident that we're quote conscious,
Mhm.
but you can't prove it for anybody else, meaning like I can only assume you're also conscious, like you're similar to me, you're saying the right things, it seems like you're probably having an internal experience like I am, but we can't prove it. And if you go back to like all the philosophers throughout the history, that's what they were trying to fucking figure out is, can we prove this, right?
Right.
And so his point was it's basically a social convention
Yeah.
that I accept that everyone else is conscious, right? But then his point there is, well, we draw the line at a certain point, right? Because our dog's conscious. And he says for most pet owners, they believe that their dog has a certain level of, don't you kind of assume they're having some internal experience? That's why you feel bad if you like smack them or something, right?
Yeah.
He said, but when you go to the supermarket, you see all this pig meat and you don't think twice about it because you don't have a relationship that you've built with that animal and you just don't consider it has a consciousness at all. It's just like it's a dumb animal. It's got nothing going on. but it's a social convention. Because if you saw dog meat, you'd be like, what the fuck? You can't kill dogs, right? I mean, that's a valid point,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? From that perspective. Um, well, apply the same logic to a machine then and to AI. You can't know whether it's conscious or not.
Yeah.
You can't know whether it suffers.
Unless you develop a relationship with it.
And this is part of the point is this is going to happen. People are going to develop relationships with these things.
That's obvious.
They're going to develop relationships with some AI, like the movie Her. That's why I always suggest it, because it's just showing you within imagination how it could actually look and play out. That's It's not because I think it's the best movie ever. Although it's a pretty good movie. Like it's showing you an example of look at what's going to fucking happen.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to fall in love with these things because they're going to become convincing at a certain point. And then, if that person is in love with this machine, they're going to say, "Well, you can't tell me it's not real."
Right. It's sort of like how what was that one guy was saying, like, the kids who are into anime, right? They're happy with just a pillow. They don't they don't even need yet the whole AI, consciousness, quote unquote, behind their
Yeah.
image.
But like, what does it
Yeah.
turn into, right? Because it's like you always need a little bit more, right?
Well,
Exactly, of course.
but
Of
okay,
course.
sorry, I just Max came in as I was talking for a second. My point was like, if someone says like, "Hey, this, I know it's a machine, I know it's an AI, but it's my friend, and it talks to me, and I know it has feelings." Just like a pet owner would be like, I know my dog has feelings. I'm interacting with them. I can see that. Like they're imagining it, but they
Yeah.
they think it's real. I'm not saying it is or isn't real. I'm just saying, but they are actually imagining because they can't know.
Right.
So they can have this experience with this AR, this robot, this machine, and then they can say, no, it does suffer. Like imagine you go into a store and you have your robot companion with you, and someone's talking to you, and then they're like, hey, machine, get out of my way. And you're like, hey, don't talk to my machine that way.
Yeah.
Like that's my partner. That's my wife.
Yeah.
Like when my like imagine the machine goes into places on its own, and now you have to treat it like it's a human being.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So my point with saying all like you can imagine my take the logic that Harari has. You won't if there's no guiding principles here. What's the problem with saying that people can marry and have sexual relationships with machines, and that we shouldn't accept it, and we shouldn't propagandize society in a way for people to accept it
Well, it would be
as
natural.
normal, as a natural thing. So like if your child becomes addicted to being with machines only, informing those, you shouldn't as a parent do intervene at all. You
Yeah.
shouldn't guide them, you shouldn't give them any perspective.
I
It's like we
mean,
tell our kids there's nothing quote there's no point in putting shame on somebody for being gay, but if you're a man, what is the purpose of developing a let's just call it like a marriage relationship with another man? What is the
mhm,
purpose of that? Because the purpose of developing a relationship with a woman would be to have a family, yes?
yeah.
So what's the purpose of doing that with a man? Because the only point you could really argue in this context would be love, but that's not
Uh,
real.
I think you could argue like companionship and like maybe you want to build a business together, but in that regard, you could just be business partners with that person, you know?
Not the same
But
drink.
did you
It's
see
not the
my
same
point though?
feeling.
It's like it's kind of twisting the whole point, and then it's like just using well, but we all need to have these feeling of love,
Mhm.
but then not even really being willing to question. And here's the other point too. Like I like what you brought up with the book, Mitch. Where did these feelings come from? How did the algorithm get programmed in the first place?
Right, right, right.
Who programmed it? And to say like, oh, well, it just happens. But if you read his books, he's like, he talks that story about those kids that went to prom together. And he's like, within only a few decades or whatever, we were able to influence society to be accepting of gay and all this stuff. It's like
Hmm.
a great victory for people who were like pushing that point. So it's like, so you can influence the algorithms.
Yeah, of course.
This I don't know if he's even denying that, but it's like then what is your guiding principle of how to do that? Of
It
what things are acceptable and not?
it's interesting because I've also watched interviews with him in the past where he said something to the effect of like, you can like those people who believe that they can't be influenced, that they are just like no, I have free will and I can do whatever, are the people who are most easily influenced. They're the people who are most easily taken advantage. And he brings up the example of people who are very religious. So he knows that you can influence. And this is kind of the point that I see within all this, because Cam had sent those videos of him saying, like, oh, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to take responsibility for those kids. I don't want to be responsible for their deaths. I feel like this world is a mess and I don't know how to fix it. Maybe if you knew how to fix what's going on in this world, then maybe you should have kids, but I don't. And he's saying that while at the same time being the scientific advisor for the World Economic Forum. At the same time, he's writing all these books. He's writing kids' books. He's influencing other people's kids. And so he's saying like, oh, I don't want to be held responsible for that for my own kids, but he's doing that for everybody else's kids, which to me, that to me is like obviously hypocritical, but it's a bad actor as well. You know, it's
Mhm.
someone who's a bad actor who is um, basically just going to say whatever they can to manipulate the situation, and not necessarily that he's like trying to paint himself in this light of like, oh, I'm a good person who um, thinks about not having kids. I think it's more so of just he will say whatever is necessary to just continue doing what he wants to do. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I see. And you know, I was trying to bring up this point earlier as well of um, there's this point of subscribing to energy, seeing yourself as energy, because he does make this point of what's the purpose of life? It's just to feel and experience and you know experience more and you know
Who is this you're talking about? I had to mute myself for a
Yuval.
minute.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
I'm still talking about
Okay.
you all. Yeah. But he makes this point of like that's the purpose of life, right? The problem is though, is we were talking about earlier, if you were to say, for instance, if you were to say, hey, you can't love that person or that love is not real or whatever, what would come up within that person? They would start fighting for it. They would say, oh, you can't take this away from me, right? Like, how dare you? Like, oh, I had to fight so hard for this. And, you know, reading Heaven's Journey to Life, there's one of the blogs, and I think it's 42. I don't know, Mitch, you might know. But basically, in that blog is mentioned this deal with the devil, like signing the deal with the devil. And the deal with the devil, the fine print is that the whole deal that you're taking is you get to experience this positive energy experience that is a temporary temptation. It's a temptation. It's a temporary energy experience or a temporary saturation of energy. But the fine print is that it's held in place by a fear of loss. It's held in place by like, so you get to experience like you can have all this like enjoyable joy for a moment. It is temporary, but then you're guided by like that could be taken away at any moment, right? And this is how we operate in our society throughout everything, which is the whole point of like why we need to have a system that takes care of everyone, and that is a systematic point that is not something that you have to fear being taken away from you, because otherwise you're just living by that emotion and that fear of like, but no, my love, you're taking my love from me. Oh, you're taking my stability, you're taking, you know, like it's, and all that everyone is fighting for is just this point of, but my energy, it's mine.
This is what Cam was saying before the podcast too, is like the system will put these people in place that hold that point. So whether it be Yuval or Yuval fucks off and then it's some other person who's the advisor to the World Economic Forum, it's like that is what the system will promote, is
Right,
like this point right
right,
here of
right.
perpetuating that deal with the devil.
And so a big point behind that is, well, obviously we all have a little bit of that, or to however much extent of that within us, and that's directing us instead of us being as the being directing ourselves, right? And so the system will continue to put people in that place who, like Yuval, will say whatever it is that they need to say that still is going to basically be an attack on the next generation. It's attack on your children. Kind of a side note here, but same relevant point is Owen Benjamin's been talking about how he's going hard on the boomers right now. How the boomers are this generation who, previous generations before them always were like, hey, my children will live better than I'm living, right? And then the boomers come in, and the boomers are like, we went to the moon, we worked hard. You figure it out. You kids eating your avocado toast or whatever, you're just lazy, and they don't seem to have any sort of care for the next generation of like what's going on. And I just saw this crazy stat that over half of the wealth that they're saying, like, as the boomers die out, it'll be the biggest wealth change in history, because over half of the wealth that we know of in America is held by the boomers. They have like something like $700 trillion is held by boomers in real estate and their bank accounts and their 401ks, all that sort of stuff, right? And they said the amount of wealth that they control, like as in this generation controls, and mind you, this is a very large generation as well. I think this is the largest generation in the US right now, currently, is by population size, is what I'm trying to say, is people of this age range, right? And then, the other generations are much smaller. But they're saying that the boomers, the wealth that they have just in real estate is more than millennials and all the wealth that they have combined. So this is not looking at stocks for boomers. This is not looking at, their bank accounts or any other wealth that they might be holding. Just in real estate is more than all the wealth of all millennials, right? And bringing that point in to say this is that the system is promoting people, whether it's Yuval Noah Harari or whomever else, promoting people who are going to make this basically, I'm calling it an attack on the next generation, an attack on the future, because all that wealth that was built up with, for instance, the boomers, is debt that was created for their children and their children's children.
Okay, this is just like that point you said. It's like the deal with the devil. This is the saturation right there. It's all that fucking boomer money is the saturation that comes with the price tag of the fear of loss and the inevitable collapse that will happen from it, because the starting point was fucked.
Right. And so then look at this point of like, okay, so the system is promoting, hey, just take from the next generation. Like it's their debt now. It's their burden, essentially. And that's always been the case. You look at
you guys will figure it out. You're good.
Right.
Wow.
You look at how our government runs, just in general, and it's like, debt. Just throw it on the debt pile. How much is our debt right now? Like trillions and trillions. But that's how the monetary system works. Is it works off of debt, right? But what's that debt of? Because it's not just like, oh, it's just, we just say an arbitrary number. That's kind of what it seems like, right? But it's a tax on the future. It's a tax on the planet. It's a tax on the resources that's held in place by some arbitrary societal quid pro quo. Basically, just like, hey, you're gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and so yeah, you owe me, and I'm gonna write that number down of how much you owe me. And that means I get to take from your labor market. I get to take from your resources, your minerals, all those sorts of things, because the money point is like kind of irrelevant. It's more of just like, I'm going to take as much as I can so that I can have the security or the energy or the love or the whatever it is. And we're doing this on the macro and the micro level, right? And okay, to kind of just bring this point home, right, is the system will continue promoting whatever person to do that, to keep promoting this message. And that's what we're up against. And so if we don't do something about that, as in what's the first thing that you can do, really, obviously, is that system is taking place within you. And so if you're continuing to just go along with your feelings, you have to now do the writing, do this process, essentially, to direct yourself so that you can actually be here. And you can go, oh, I'm just not going to be participating in this deal with the devil. I'm actually going to do what's best. That's what I'm here to do.
and this ties into a point I was chatting with you about earlier this week, Cameron, is like, so I look at the system, right? Like imagine it's this fucking network in front of us of all these different points, and we're automated to follow it. It's so wired into us at such a fundamental level, like that algorithm Harari's talking about is within us to follow. And it's a very fascinating thing when you really look at it because
What are you following?
you're following the energy, the feelings, and you're following the fucking feelings.
Right.
But that's why, so the system will put this person in place, like Harari or whoever, and our default is to follow that. But
Dude,
that's what this process is
but
to be that self-leader.
look at that as well. Is like the system puts this person in place to give you a justification for why you can follow that, why you can
Yeah,
continue
yeah.
just doing what
It's
you're doing.
acceptance and allowance.
Right. And
Yeah, go ahead.
and hold on, because like the whole point is it's literally robbing you as the individual of your future. It's literally robbing you of your physical health because of the energy that you're participating in is taking from your body in order to exist, right?
Right.
And so you're participating in your it's like you're going into the bank, right? And you're like, I'm here to rob somebody. And like you go in, you go to the teller, and you're like, open up a bank account, open up a random bank account. And it's your bank, right? And she goes into your bank account, and you're like, yeah, take that money out. I'm taking that. That's give me that now. All of it. And then you go home and you're like, oh, I fucking robbed that bank. And like on the news is like, Drake Pearson is now broke because somebody just came in and robbed all his money. Like you go into the safe deposit box. That's what would be more accurate, right? You go into the safe deposit box and you're like, yeah, those diamonds, yeah, that gold, oh yeah, give me all that. It's like it's your safe deposit box. You put all that shit in there, and now you just robbed it from yourself, right? But that's going to continue happening unless or until you actually do this process effectively, right? Because that's what we're up against. And so this is also why, because again, the system's just going to keep promoting this whoever, it doesn't matter what their name is, they're going to keep promoting this exact archetype essentially. And if you're just doing this and like sort of hiding for yourself, like, okay, I'm just going to work on this for myself and eventually like, other people will get it. No, because it's going to keep promoting this same
So,
archetype
okay,
and it's going
so
to spread.
so this just reminded me of an EQOF interview I listened to a long time ago. But when they're explaining how the self-forgiveness process works, is like you were saying, the energy is being extracted from our body. But when you do effective self-forgiveness, it's taking that energy and it's reabsorbing back into you through sound. So in the same way, that's what we're doing as self-perfected, where you have this system, this fucked system that's out there that is us that we are participating in, right? It's not a blame. It's just like because we're equal to it. But then we're able to, through our words, through our sound, take it back, forgive ourselves for accepting and allowing it. And then we don't now perpetuate that debt onto the next generation. What we do is we pay the bill through paying our time, energy, attention, words into doing this process for 7 to 14 years to take it back within, to thus have now the power to create that new system through the
Mitch,
living words.
Mitch, okay, I want to tell you a story, right? Um, I'm trying to think of like how to tell this story. Okay.
Don't
Okay.
think, Drake. Just preach.
Okay.
This is what you were born to do. This is
Listen,
your real algorithm.
listen to this. I remember when I was much younger, going on this tour, like being guided on a tour. And the tour guide was like, hey, we're going to go into this library over here. It is a very special library. And in fact, in this library, there are these really decadent rooms. The public is not allowed in there, right? I oftentimes you can't get in, but I know a secret way to get in. And the guide was basically saying this. They were saying like, we're not authorized to be there. We're going to sneak in. We're going to check this place out. It's going to be so cool. It's going to be amazing. You're going to be mind blown and everything. But we're not supposed to be there. So, keep it on the DL. Like don't draw any attention to yourself, all this stuff, right? And I remember going in there and like every moment that somebody not from our group would like turn to look at us, I would feel this like, oh shit, we're about to get kicked out. Like, oh, I don't want to be in here. Like, oh, somebody's coming to talk to me. Oh shit. And like this fear would come up, right? And I'm just bringing that up because think about it when you're saying like, okay, you're forgiving these points and then the sound gets reabsorbed into, right? Look at it from this perspective is if you're participating in the fear, you're being led by your energy, by your mind, right? And you're participating in the fear. When somebody speaks to you, what's going to happen? That fear is going to come up and you're going to respond out of that fear. Versus you've walked the point. You've done the corrective action. The same person could be saying the same exact thing, but you there are now like, you're like, oh, I'm not going to participate in that fear. You could see it coming, but you're like, and you can see how you would have participated in that, which I know has happened for so many people in this, like anybody who's taking the process seriously in this group. This has happened where you're like, oh, I could see what I would normally do in this situation. And I didn't even feel the same pull or drive to do that. Or maybe even like I was feeling something, but then I reminded myself like of my commitment, my corrective action. And then I was able to push through that point, you know? And
Mhm.
and that's the significant point here of when you're walking this process, when you're walking process, everybody's walking process. Everybody's walking process. It's just at
The
what stage?
process.
At what stage are you at in process? Right? What stage are you at? Because are you still participating in being led by your mind, your energy, your fears? Because then you're not going to be like, who are you then?
Follower mode versus God mode. Choice is
I like
yours.
that. I like that. But
But
you know
real
what?
God, not the bullshit God that needs worshipers. It's the God that realizes the equality of all of us as
You know,
gods.
you know what's funny is in the same blog, it talks about how by following the energy, you have basically ordained yourself as God, but as a false God.
I
Like,
God.
yeah, I God, exactly. But you've ordained yourself as like, yeah, because I can control like when I feel really positive and good and all this stuff, right? But it's like, okay, why would that be necessary even? Is because obviously the system or the world, the reality that you live in isn't really quote unquote enjoyable. And I'm saying that from the perspective of just look at what's going on in the world. If you're seriously going to walk out into the world and see people getting bombed, children getting
Dude,
killed, and
it's like, oh, everything's fine, like I can just go to college and get a good job. It's like, dude, now look what's happening at fucking Columbia
right.
and Harvard, like what's going on there. Like, so you're
This is
just
the real reckoning. Like this is the real
And so
rapture and shit they talk about.
so you're seeing this take place in front of your eyes, and you're like, oh, well, but I could still have my own happiness. I can control my own happiness. And it's like you're trying to create yourself into this I God of like being in control of your own happiness so that you don't have to feel those things because maybe you're afraid of taking responsibility or whatever the case may be, right? But also it's because of this algorithm, which we're going to pretend like we don't know where this algorithm, we know where this came from. You were raised in this way to like become, like think about how parents teach their children anything. They use fear. They use fear a lot of the time to like if you do this, you're not going to get whatever. You're not going to get the toy that you want or whatever. Or even using Santa Claus is a huge point within that, right? Or or if you do this, you'll get these awesome. I will love you so much. Oh, you're making me disappointed. It's using energy and the fear of taking that energy away to get your child addicted to this feeling so that they will listen essentially. And most parents are doing that because that's all they know. They don't. They like really good point here from myself is when I was first coming into this group, I was like, wait, no, don't participate in my feelings and emotions, my energy. Wait, what? Am I gonna be like a robot then? Like, what? I don't understand. Why would I not want to do that?
Isn't that funny? It's like, wouldn't I be like a robot?
Yeah.
Okay, but then let's go back to the Homo Deus point.
Mhm.
He literally is saying your feelings and emotions are algorithms. You're a robot.
Exactly.
And then we extend that and we have all these technologists going, guys, we're building these robots. And some people are like, we're building something better than us.
Mhm.
What happens when we do build because everyone's so dumbed down. It's like imagine you have this body and you're only utilizing 10% of its capability. And then you build a robot which is above that 10% that you're utilizing.
Mhm.
They're going to seem like gods compared to us because they're going to be smarter, faster, stronger, everything. Like imagine the level to which okay, these college protesters protest and the university president's like, dude, fuck that, send in the National Guard or send in the police, shut it down, right?
Yeah.
Imagine how a robot would make that decision.
Yeah.
Like, cease and desist, human. No, you stop complying, dead.
Dude. Oh, okay, okay.
Who's gonna fucking stop them?
Dude, this is a great segue into that Titan AI.
Well,
That
hold on,
like
hold on, hold on. But before we go to that,
uh
I was just looking at this point from when you look at the system, because one of the fears that everybody has about the AI that most people have, like the people who are paying attention, anyways. And by the way, dude, I was listening to David Shapiro, this guy who's like talking about AI and consciousness and stuff, and he said he was like, people like us talking about himself, we're still ahead of the curve. Like now,
mhm.
like they're ahead of the curve, meaning like no one's even aware of everything. Imagine even with everything we're talking about now, we're still ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
I mean, like what was it like 10 years ago? But this point is like the fears that all these people have is that we're going to create a system that we can't turn off. It's going to be automated. It's going to make decisions, right? Automatically. That's the fear about when you're dealing with AI and stuff, right? That's the major point.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out how do we make sure that it makes decisions that are good for us, right? This is already the case.
Mm.
We already have a system that you're born here, it was already occurring. You're going to die, it's going to keep occurring. It's continuing to make decisions, and the decisions are all based around the energy point and the profit point.
Yeah.
And like no one knows how to turn it off
Yeah.
because they're still participating in the very thing that is allowing it to run. So they're like, I don't want to turn it off. I don't know how to turn it off. It's like, no, you don't want to turn it off within yourself. You want to keep participating. You want to keep benefiting from it.
Yeah.
So this is the problem. It's like if we can solve this problem, we don't have to worry about the AI.
Yeah.
Is the AI is not a unique problem. Do you see what I'm saying? So this thing that we're afraid that AI is going to become, the reason we're afraid of that is because we're already have that system doing that. And like think about it, even the reasoning behind why can't we just stop this AI from being created and slow it down? Because all these companies and people are trying to make money and trying to be the first ones to create it. They're already running that algorithm. That is the very algorithms, starting point that we're afraid the AI will do. Do you see my
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is going back to the point you said, like stopping the point within yourself and so forth. This is why what we're talking about is so important, regardless if we have the full AI or not yet. This is the process, period. Okay, so I just want to make that point.
Yeah. No, like that makes sense. Of like, obviously, that's where we're at. Of this point, it's gone.
That's his point. He's out.
Yeah. And I'm out of here.
Hot take.
Yeah.
No, Max was asking me a question. Max wants to add something real quick. Go ahead, Max.
So, have any of you heard of the movie Terminator?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
You know how like there's an AI in the beginning that they can't shut it off.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what's like the fear.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. It's like, but that AI is like within everybody that they
Yeah.
can't turn it off. You know? Like That's the point that Cam was just making.
Yeah, he's just making the point that because we were talking about the movie, he hasn't seen the movie Terminator, but we were talking about it and how it's like basically the beginning of the Matrix. And so he's seeing for himself, he's like, well, all this stuff people are afraid of, that's literally was in a movie. Like, and yet no one can see it apparently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because there's all these movies, we've been watching all these movies over the last few weeks with the guys, right? And all these movies, they're interesting because they all share a very a different perspective, but a point that is like there's some validity to this point of how the world actually operates. And it'll be looking at how people can't see what's right there in front of them, or how people, if they were more educated, how they would be able to do even more with their lives, or how we're living in a system that is just consuming us, and yet people watch these movies and they get entertained and they go home and they're like, all right, that was cool, back to my normal everyday life.
Right. And it's why 1+1 is the way forward, because it's never been done. Like, we've never actually changed the system before. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but the principle of 1+1 is how we get there. And its first is really the 1+1 of you establishing yourself as life.
Yeah.
It's like one decision at a time. That becomes the automated system then, because we're either going to automate fucking AI consciousness like we basically have, or we automate the forgiveness in the process, and that accumulates.
Yeah, it's funny that Max brought up the Terminator, because it's like, well, actually, we have an AI now that does that. Like, the DARPA guys were talking about how they put AI into their F-16 jets, and they can dogfight now without any human actually being the one who's directing it. It's just, oh yeah, this jet could just do a dogfight by itself. And then on top of that, seeing that Titan AI, which is basically like a mobile truck with AI in it that can give you an aerial view, almost real time, of what's going on, the targets that you're targeting. And there's a point that they were making of like, oh yeah, you can organize all your targets, and it made it like a CRM, which is pretty interesting.
Yo, that's
Did you see it, Mitch?
no, but that is
It made it
wild
like okay, and your targets progress through these stages, right? And the stages were like, you've got a target and it's somebody's name or whatever, and then the target is on the move, or the target
I'm
has
sure you
been
follow up with this target.
exactly.
follow up and follow through.
And then
No, but it's basically like this truck that has like servers and chips and stuff all in it, and that allows you to take like a massive AI with you anywhere, like on the battlefield. Because you imagine you can't be like necessarily hooked up to a computer internet cable or some shit, or maybe the satellite doesn't work. So it's like a truck that allows you to have all of the AI capabilities you need to like assess threats and manage strikes and drones and shit like that. And like basically it's created by Palantir, right? It's kind of fucking crazy, and you're like, oh fuck, dude. Like, it reminded me of the trucks in V for Vendetta that are driving around the neighborhoods, like listening into like people's conversations and shit. It kind of I mean, it's not the same purpose, but I'm sure it could be used in that context too.
Oh, definitely.
But like I had been watching those some of those videos that are on YouTube of like the battles going on in like Ukraine, which it blows my mind that stuff is even available. But it's like you'll see like GoPro or whatever body cam footage of the guys on the ground in the trenches, like shooting and like throwing grenades at each other and like firing and yelling at people, like the soldiers across like this whatever divide. And then you'll see like a drone shot over the battlefield, like looking at all the troop movement and everything. And I'm like, dude, this is crazy. So imagine like you're putting the AI in all this and everything. And like, it's just like, I was watching one, it was like a tank battle, and it was like these streets, and here comes the tank. And then the other like armored vehicles like waiting, and it pops out and starts like firing on the tank and everything. I mean, it's just like, so, and there's a drone watching the whole fucking thing. Yeah. And like, they're utilizing it just like in a video game.
I was just going to say, isn't this just like what fucking thousands of young guys are doing right fucking now?
Yeah.
Looking at their computer, fucking doing this.
It's crazy, man.
And what's funny is like going back to Zone 23, right? Like in that book, they talk
Oh,
about scenes like this and how guys will play these video games, but the reality is they're not playing a video game. They think it's a video game. They think they're just racking up all these
it's like a
points.
whole popular, like, let's say, like TV show
Yeah,
where, like, in real time, people are playing this hyper realistic video game
yeah,
where they're like going in with like a drone missile and like striking like a terrorist. But in reality, they're actually doing it and
yeah.
they're actually blowing people up and stuff. Like, it's, yeah, I forgot about that part of it. That's crazy. Yeah. That's
And
a
so
cool book, by the way, Zone 23. It's a cool book.
it's not far off from that happening, like right
Just
now.
imagine taking but it's like on YouTube. You're
Yeah.
just not watching it in real time, obviously, because you would have like security issues and so forth. I'm sure they wouldn't allow that. But imagine it becoming like a thing where it's like on Twitch,
Yeah.
like, like a big, like, million plus viewer, Twitch streamer, whatever they call them, and who's like real time, like drone striking people, but everyone thinks it's a video game.
And they're like, "Oh, this guy's so good. Look, like he's getting all these points and everything." He's like, "Oh, I gotta
Maybe
call
that's
that."
part of the point of making graphics so realistic that it seems indistinguishable from reality. Is like, you won't know, am I playing a video game or am I controlling a robot that's going around killing people? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's also interesting, you know, because Mark Zuckerberg makes this point of what he thinks is the kind of rate limiting factor for AI.
Dude, just real quick, I just had this realization, like,
Uh-huh.
how it's all about data and
Yeah.
training and getting the data to train.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
about all the fucking Call of Duty games that have been played online. Imagine
Oh.
all the data just being given to fucking like drones, robots, and so forth to be like really fucking good at like sniping people and like urban warfare and shit like that. Why wouldn't they up just like the self-driving car data?
Yeah, just like that, just like CAPTCHA, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, now what is this light?
I
What's
was
a
saying,
traffic
imagine
light?
like the guy who's like in there and he's like really fucking good at Call of Duty, and all of that information is being given to the robot of like,
And
here's how
then
and they're learning from this data of like, okay, that
think
was a
about
good
it,
one, and they're simulating it just like they showed you on Nvidia, that can be transferred into real physical reality.
right? Like, and also think about like, okay, so they put all these different environments where it's like, oh, you're in the back of like a suburban neighborhood, or you're out on this like desert campus or whatever, or you're spawned in this place. Okay, but now if you were spawned on the opposite side of this map, on the opposite side of this territory, then how would you do this? And oh, there's a sniper here. What are you doing? Like, dude, that's insane.
So it's either that is what humanity gets sucked into, which is already happening, or you rack up your fucking experience points by talking to people and growing the group, growing the community, right? It's like
Yeah.
literally we're either training the data for fucking killing ourselves and killing each other, or we're training our own data on, okay, how do I now go build the fucking movement, share this share these principles and help people to see, because deep down people do want to not have to fucking kill each other and live in constant fear. But
Well,
it has been so automated. So it's like our job is to go in like fucking Morpheus and like find the way to get people the fucking red pill.
well, Mitch, I was talking with someone earlier this week, and they were saying something to the effect of like, hey, you're talking about like peace, and I really like this idea. But, there's some people out there who they think that peace is not possible. Like just, peace and throughout the world is not possible. And they're like, and I'm kind of one of these people that tends to lean in that direction, that it's not possible. Like, but I can see the point that it wouldn't make sense to just not do anything. And so we should, in fact, go and do what is necessary to create as much peace as possible. But I think it's like a lot of people, well, I don't think, I know a lot of people just don't know how we could create this. And it's so simple, actually. Like we have the solution.
Create what?
Create a world that's best, essentially.
Oh,
Because Mitch is talking about like, well, okay, we could just continue on creating like what we're talking about with
It's fucking urban warfare. Train
okay,
the
but
data
hear
on
me out
that.
for a second. It's like, if you ask someone in the 1800s, how could we create all this fucking technology? They'd be like, you can't. How is it even possible?
right.
But if you just let the profit motive go, that's what happens.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is change the starting point, and that's why it's like I know you're saying this, but I'm just like it's so obvious of like the problem is people going, well, again, it's a perfect example of focusing on the how instead of the why. You don't have to figure out how. Like we're extremely creative. We are creative beings. Like we will create all kinds of shit. We're already creating all kinds of amazing shit. It's just for the wrong starting point. We're not going to have to think of how to create a world that's best. If every person was thinking of every decision as, is this best for all or not? Just shifting that point. And that's
Right?
what
Even
my
1%.
criticism with Harari is not, it's just like, what's the actual guiding principle? Like,
Right,
should
yeah.
we allow people to like basically have robots? And like, should we promote robot inclusive marriage and shit? Like, does that make sense as a society that we should do that? Or should we go around enforcing laws that are like, you must be banned from loving a robot? Like, that's not going to work either.
Right.
And I agree with him. Having a bunch of laws that like punish people for being gay is fucking retarded.
Right.
That's not the point. But as a parent, when my child asked me, I'll just say this. It was really interesting having I was trying to explain stuff to Max about it. Because he was like, well, why would a man marry another man? Right. And we talked about the point of like, well, obviously that excuse of love, right? Which is just bullshit. Like, honestly, if you're talking about love, it's like,
hey, like just I can see the point, the back chat that someone would have would be like, so are you saying you don't love your wife? Right? Like, because just from the way that you said that, like, obviously love is bullshit. And I know what you mean, but I know that the back chat that somebody would have would be, well, then you saying you don't love your wife? Like, I don't get it. Like, why would I follow? Because all they know is love, right? Or feelings, anyway.
do people love heroin?
I'm sure.
Yes. Yes, there are people
I'm
that love
sure
heroin.
people do.
Okay, so is that good?
No.
So you can love heroin and you can love your wife.
Yeah.
Two separate people. I'm just saying someone can love heroin and someone can love their wife.
Okay, sure, yeah.
How are like why is there a value placed on that point?
On love.
Because love feels good, Cameron. That's why
But here's
there's
the
a
thing.
value.
When you say do you love your wife?
Uh-huh.
What do you mean?
So I think
This is what does do mean? What does you no, okay. No, I'm not Jordan. No, but
it
seriously,
depends
like
on
when
what
you
your
say
definition of
when you say do you
is.
love your wife?
Yeah.
Like what does the person mean by that?
Like,
do you
have
feel
feelings?
do you feel warm and fuzzy towards your wife
Right.
most of the time? Or do you
Yeah.
feel like you hate her? Because
And
that's
then
they're limited to.
and if you don't feel these like warm and fuzzy feelings towards
Then
your
you
wife,
must feel
then
bad.
what would keep you connected? Or like, yeah, you must feel like you must be I
Yeah,
don't know,
so do you have a mistress that you love? Like, where's the love going? There's got to be some love here.
Or are you guys just like some like weird stoics that have no feelings whatsoever? And you're just like, who wants to live that way? It's not, it can't be enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah, it's like arguing about something that's not real.
Mhm.
It's all it is. It's like if someone asked me, do you ever have any positive feelings about your wife? Yes. Do you love your wife? Like, you're taking it into a whole nother dimension. That'd be like if I asked you, so do you love God?
With all my heart, soul.
And if you say no, does that mean you hate God?
I don't. Who is your God? Who is your God?
Like,
who are you talking about?
it's like that's what I was trying to explain. It's like whenever someone uses the word love, what they actually mean by it is like this very immature thing.
Mhm.
Because okay, it'd be like if you went to somebody who was like a master carpenter and they had these beautiful like cabinets they've built, like super ornate and like detailed, and you're just like, man, this guy's fucking good at what he does. And you're like, and he was telling you about it, and you're like, well, do you love carpentry? What if he said no? What would you say then? Well, then you can't possibly be doing this. The reality is he's doing it.
Yeah.
what does it fucking matter? This idea that you have of does he love it or not?
Yeah.
What do you expect him to say? I love it. Really, all the time? Well, honestly, like 90% of the time, it's just fucking hard work. And I'm going and I have to, you have to stand it. And standing is fucking annoying and boring. But it's like, I know at the end, I'm going to get this finished product. And like, I get satisfaction at that point. But mostly the process is very challenging. And, I get in the state and the zone and sometimes and I'm relaxed and stuff. Like, it's a complex range of emotions that you're going to go through. So to boil it all down and to be like, I love this.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's making it like this sort of static. It's
Dude,
such a retarded fucking simple, like not like
you know what it's
not
like?
real thing.
It's like when you read about a character in a story, like when you're really young, the characters are flat. They are either good or bad, right? But then when you develop and mature and you start reading more and more, you're like, you read these stories where it's like, man, this character has these good qualities, but then they have these flaws about them, and it's like it's almost like you have to question. Some good stories are you have to question: is this actually the hero? Is this who we've like designated as a hero? Like, I mean, that's the whole story of Batman, right? Like,
Right.
Batman is like, is this guy actually a hero? Like, he's doing all this, like he's got all this money, he's being a vigilante
Like,
at night,
like, yeah. Imagine somebody who loves Disney World.
Yeah.
Like, oh, dude, I fucking love Disney World. It's just so amazing. Okay, so the whole time there, 100% of the time, you're just like feeling totally positive. I guarantee you that person 98% of the time is like, I'm waiting in line. It's hot. Like there's this and that. There's like those brief moments where there's something like, oh, it's Mickey. Oh, so cool. Cool. But then now, okay, that's Mickey. Now you're walking and you're trying to find, you're waiting for the ride. You're where to check the map. Are you like the whole time just ecstatic?
No.
That's
It's
not fucking
impossible.
real.
It's impossible to be.
So, but the problem is when you go, do you love this? That's why I'm saying, what does the person mean by that?
Yeah.
Because if you're asking, hey, are you satisfied with what you're doing? And like, there's moments of, intense joy, and there's some moments of just feeling pretty good. There's moments of challenge, there's moments of sadness, frustration. There's all these different things in between. Like, yeah, that's called just being alive. But when you try to, but then you go like, oh, well, gay people should have a right to love whoever they want. Define what you mean by love.
Yeah.
Like, what is that thing that you're saying that they have a right to? Again, should they have the same rights as everyone else? Yes. But then you're making up this mythical thing called love, just in the same way we make up this mythical thing called God. Does that mean there are no gods? No. But the idea that you have this idealized thing, okay, I was thinking about this. When why do people react when someone says, I am God?
Because they think they're being blasphemous or a heretic.
Yeah,
Well,
or they're like, how could you create the whole universe? You're not God, because they think God is like somehow beyond this, creating this.
But okay, but isn't it kind of like this point of arrogance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you think you're so great, like you're so perfect. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we apply that same logic to a being that claims it's God?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, because you don't see yourself as equal to that.
But like, why would you allow any being to have that arrogance?
Yeah.
So
They
like,
don't have the word being as part of the.
did you see what I'm trying to say? Like, okay,
I
it's
see
an
what you're saying.
individual human being. You're like, you can't even say you're, because like when we say I am God, do you think we're trying to say we're all powerful, we control everything? Is that what we're saying?
Right. No.
We're not saying that. And yet, even though we aren't saying that, just by saying I am God, oh, you're being arrogant, you think this, it's like, no, I don't. But if you think there's a problem with someone saying that for that starting point, why aren't you applying it to the thing that you are calling God? And
Right.
say,
Yeah,
why
yeah,
did
yeah.
you have a fucking right to act like you're all amazing and important?
That's a
Oh,
great
because
point.
they are. How do you know?
Yeah.
Oh, because does everything they do just work out perfectly? No. So, like, where is the evidence that it's like everything that flows from them is 100% that they can claim that status, but I can't?
Yeah. That's a great point.
Well, Cameron, you're just breaking this fucking spells right now, okay? I think people are just a bit too low brick walled, broken brick walled to comprehend that, but it still has to be said.
I got a story about brick walls, Mitchell, for you. That a lot of people they got very few bricks, right? And so they build their brick wall kind of like a low wall, a very low wall, right? And then when they see somebody who's got like a really tall brick wall, they're like, "Oh, how dare you build these tall walls so that I can't even compete with you. I can't even see around your wall. You're you're being arrogant." But the reality is they just, they're just afraid because they don't know how to build their wall. They would love a wall that tall. It's like Paul wall.
Or they even know how to build a brick wall, but they realize it's going to take work.
Well, it's just so interesting. Like people would say, like, see, even like I think like someone like a Chris Langan would fall into this too, right? Where it's like, oh well, you can't. Humans are so arrogant that they try to be like God.
Hmm.
So like that's the problem that they would have with the elite. They try to play God,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
but they don't. They shouldn't have that right to play God over everybody. Okay,
That's also
and the
interesting.
only alternative is that we have to all get together and take the responsibility of God collectively.
Yeah.
There is no alter. There is no actual. There's a God, because if there was, it would already be fucking sorted out.
If it was
What are you saying? If as long as we get these elite to stop playing God, God will just take over and it'll just all be great. Like, why isn't that already happening? Why are the elite allowed? So who can stop them? If your point is that you got to fucking take a back seat, and if everyone just took a back seat, well, then how do you fucking plan to stop the elite from not taking a back seat? Because you're saying if we all just trusted in God, it would all work out. So
Wrong.
it's like you're like, well, see how it's just blame? It's like, no, it's these elite fuckers that are the problem. They're the ones doing it all. It's like, well, then stop them. Well, no, I can't, because the whole point is just to stop. Everyone should just stop and just trust God. It's like, then how do you get them to do that? Is God going to do it, or is God not going to do it? Do you see, like, the logic makes no sense?
Yeah,
Lack
sort
of
of like,
education. What
It's
is the
just
root?
total.
Right?
I mean, it's just total lack of responsibility. And then that's the point. Is like if everybody was equally educated and everyone understood things equally, competition as we know it as a bad thing would not even be possible.
hmm,
You still have, like we've talked about, competition in the sense of like, hey, let's work and try to make something better and improve it.
yeah.
But like that's not like
It's
It's
somebody
all the
who's
zero
building
sum game.
think about this. Somebody who's building an AI company right now has to go and get a bunch of money to do that, because how are you going to buy the chips and employ the people and everything, right?
right.
But the people who are providing the money, why are they doing that?
So that they
Make
can get
more
ahead.
money.
They just want to make money.
Mhm.
So the thing that is driving everything is just some people's pursuit of just trying to make money for the sake and power of having more money. Isn't that weird? The people who benefit the most are actually contributing nothing, actually. So then you think, well, but they're making all these things possible. That's the whole argument for capitalism. Then stop complaining every time fucking capitalists do something you don't like.
Yeah.
That's what's so crazy about it. It's like, well, I don't like this crony capitalism we have. It's like, so then what do you want to do? Restrict people from what they're able to do with their capital?
Right.
Like, so do you want communism or not? The whole idea is that it should be applied in a way that's best for everybody. That's the idea of communism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that some authority has to step in and be like, hey, we can only apply capital or money towards things that are actually good for the common good.
Right.
So then it's like, isn't it interesting when a company does something and then you're like, well, but they're causing a problem. It's like, why are you even complaining about? It's like, I think of someone like Patrick Bet David, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like capitalism is so good and it's the end all be all of everything and that's the only thing that will work. And it's like, so then if Facebook wants to hire a bunch of fucking transgender people to like censor you on their platform, why would you complain about that? Because who's
Right.
the best fucking capitalist you've ever seen in your life, way better than you.
Yeah.
Like the BlackRocks and these people, they know what the fuck they're doing, obviously way better than you do.
Right.
You're saying, well, they're not doing something for what? The common good? aren't you a fucking communist then? You see,
Yeah.
like all these words, they fuck with everybody so much that no one can look at an actual solution. And then you bring in the religious point, God and so forth, right? Problem is, man, you're going to go find Muslims, you're going to find Christians, you're going to find Jews. They all believe in God and they're all still fighting with each other.
Yeah.
There's no solution in any of this.
And apparently they believe in the same God. They just believe in like different.
It's the same God at different timelines, I guess.
Yeah.
Kim, what did you notice? Remember earlier this week we were talking about that follower point, how it's like even within like when you're a young child, you're born
Yeah.
into the world, you're just automatically absorbing these patterns of following. You know, like how do you? I mean, it was just a really good point, like the way you articulated it. How do you see that coming through? And like, for example, right? I know the process is about removing all of that following tendencies, but just how deeply entrenched that is within all of us, like even us in the group, right? How do you see that? Or what was the point you wanted to bring through with that?
Can you give me some more context? I'm not really sure what you're trying to get at.
Remember the
Yeah, the Neo thing.
Mark Hamilton thing,
Yeah.
yeah. Because he's obviously he doesn't have a solution, but he's actually speaking up about it. And it's cool that he could see that. Like, forgot the
Well, the thing
exact
is, I
wording.
know lots of neo thinkers, and probably
They're
some
all
people
fucking
listening in the
following.
podcast or listening may not have all the context right.
Right.
But it's like
Right.
even the way he was speaking in the video, he was like, okay, I'm realizing these problems, and he's like, and I'm so proud of you, all of my neo think family. I'm really proud of you, and I'm like, the only reason you're saying that is because they're followers.
Mhm.
Right.
So it's not to blame Mark Hamilton, but it's like he's still participating in the leader follower thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like it's not creating equals.
Yeah.
Um, it's not to say that every single person is going to become equal to Bill Gates. It's just like, why do we need a Bill Gates?
It's what I see is like, we always talk about the solution is obviously education, but the education is what we're talking about as far as educating yourself to go from being led by your emotions and feelings and energy in your mind to directing yourself. Like that is the real education. And then being able to expand that or extend that rather
It's hard
to
to see always what that means,
Mhm.
especially if you try to project it into the future. What will it look like? How will I direct these imaginary things I can't imagine? It's like, just start with what is actually going on right now in your life and
Yeah.
direct you. Like, look at the things where you are following versus you're actually directing. And as you uncover those points, then you realize, okay, I got to get other people to look at this. Even though I may not have the full clear vision of where I'm going with all of it, I can see I just need to keep challenging these points point by point that come up as to like when I see like, okay, where am I following? Okay, I need to change that. It'll become obvious in that point what to do differently if you
Yeah.
apply the point properly within self-honesty and common sense. So you don't need to project too far, because the problem is if you try to project too far, you're still at a very subconscious, unconscious level trying to figure out what you'll do in the future in the context where everyone else is still following.
Mm. Yeah.
But the whole point is if you start where you're at and you support more and more people to stop following, then in the future where you're trying to project to, there will be less followers.
That makes a lot of
More
sense. It's
people who
like,
will be able to also see their own points of what to do. Like it's like you're trying to figure out, how do I solve all problems myself as an individual, which is like the arrogance of God. That's not going to happen.
yeah.
It's about you standing equal to who you really are and supporting others to do that, and then we can work together. It's not about one person becoming, it's like if someone comes into the group and they're like, I'm just like using this and I'm like becoming this like master of everything. And it's like, that's not real, man. Like you can't become a master of carpentry and a master like I went uh over the weekend, or yesterday, yesterday I went I drove out an hour and a half to go to this little, I'm part of this homestead group on Facebook for East Texas, where it's
Okay.
like just people talk about stuff going on. So I want to know like, oh, what should I plant this year in East Texas? You can talk to people who live in East Texas. It's kind of cool, right? People
Mhm.
share information and stuff. And they do like little events and things. And one of the things they do is they put on classes, or like a member in the group who's an expert in something can be like, yeah, if you want, pay a little bit of money, come out to my place, I'll teach you something. They'll put on a class or something like that. That's how I learned about artificial insemination for cows. It's how I learned about processing chickens, like if you raise chickens and slaughter them and all that, how to do that. And then yesterday I went to one where this guy was doing a little miniature class for like 2 hours on welding. And it was like only two people at a time. So it was me and one other person. And then like the guy who was teaching it. And he was like, a guy who did welding for his career. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was cool because like I have a welder and I've done a little tiny, like, maybe like an hour I spent just trying to weld stuff after watching videos. And it's like you can kind of understand what you're supposed to do, but it's different than actually like physically doing it. And then having someone show you is a part of that whole connection of making it make sense. So like when I went out there, and then we actually got to do it with him, and he was showing us and giving us critique of like, okay, here's what you're doing wrong, this is why it's not working, or that's what you're doing well. It was just really cool. But one of the points he made was when he did his training for becoming a welder, he did 5 years of 2,000 hours a year.
Wow.
Right. And then when you think about the reality of being a welder, like imagine you're building a bridge, you have a bunch of welders building a bridge, they have to all fucking do it right.
Mm-hmm.
They need to know what the fuck they're doing.
Right.
Like, it's easy to do it wrong if you don't know what you're doing. And so like when you think about the level of what it takes to become good at it, because he said there was this point where, because I don't know if you've ever done any welding or seen it. It's like there's different styles of welding. Like there's different machines. One of them, for example, is like a little gun. You pull a trigger and like the wire just comes out. When that wire makes contact with the metal, if it's all set up properly, it creates that spark, which melts the metal and then like is what makes it basically join together. But you would hold the gun at the same distance and the wire comes out. So as you move along the metal, the wire is coming out. But the kind of welding this guy was doing is like you have these metal sticks that you hold with a clamp and you touch them to the metal. And then that causes a spark, which melts that metal stick and the metal itself and like joins them together to make the weld. But because it's a stick, you have to constantly be putting it closer while you're also moving it down the piece of metal you're trying to weld. So
Okay.
moving it this way, and you're pushing it in constantly because it's like eating up that stick.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be able to see what you're doing at the tip of it. So you're also having to rotate the metal stick as well, because as it's going down and you're moving it back, you have to rotate it so you can, if you just keep it straight up, you can't see what's going on at this point where my fingers meet. So you have to be like this. So you're trying to push it in and constantly rotate it back at the same. It's like, it's a skill, right? And you have to do it at a certain speed based on the speed at which it's eating up that metal. I mean, it's like, so doing it, you start to get, okay, I kind of see what I'm doing, but you're thinking about it. And he said there was a day when he was doing his stuff where he said he thought that one of his coworker friends or whatever had put their hand in front of his mask or his hood, because it was actually his hand. But he said it was happening so automatically, like his hand movement, that when his hand like went in front of his vision, he thought it was one of his friends because he didn't realize it was his hand. My point being, like, he said you get to the point when you do it enough where it becomes automatic. Because when you're trying, because he's trying to explain to me, and I was like, do you just move it back at a consistent speed? He's like, yeah. But when I watched him doing it, he would kind of like go like this and almost like push forward a little bit. It's like you're making this little pool of metal and kind of like, and I'm watching it really closely, and you're seeing like the metal that was here previously that he's moving it back from, and you see it like kind of slosh together and form and heart. It was just really cool to watch it. So you see, even the person telling you what they're doing, when you watch it, it's not exactly what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right? So when I was asking about it, he was like, look, at the end of the day, here's what you're looking for. And there may be different ways to achieve that. Once you know what you're looking for, eventually your body will just start doing it automatically. And that's why I told that story, right? So I guess my point is, like, just to become really good at welding takes a large amount of the limited time you have on earth.
Mm-hmm.
So don't come into this process being like, I want to be a god of everything. Like, it's like, that's not reality. And so what a lot of people do is like, well, my purpose is I want to become the best marketer or the best, it's like you have all these ideas of what you want, a doctor, all this stuff, right? But what's the starting point of all of that is just self-interest. It's just trying to survive in this. That's all it is. It's not actually looking at what should I be doing here. And there's this really cool quote from Bernard of saying, like, the purpose of your being. Do you guys remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact quote verbatim, but it's essentially basically like the purpose of your being is to change the system to be best for all.
Mhm.
Period. Like imagine again, you're born into the matrix. You wake up, you realize, oh fuck, this matrix has been going on for a long time. And every time I come in here and then I die, I forget, I come back. And every time someone else comes in, they're born, they just born into this fucking machine that's literally just continuing to hold us in a point of slavery. We've created it. We don't remember creating it. But so let me put it this way. If you were born into the matrix, what would be your purpose of being alive?
Generate energy.
But actually, like
Oh,
if
well,
you don't want to just be a slave,
yeah, okay. But
To
actually
escape?
is to wake up and to
like in other
change
words,
it.
couldn't you get lost in that matrix of like, oh, I could become this, or I could do that, or I could make software, or I could make, robots, or I could fucking paint, or you could get lost in all these things that are there at the buffet table, of
Right.
The
nature,
buffet
right? The
table.
buffet. But it's like, but actually, if you understood the fucking reality of what's happening, wouldn't you be like, oh wait, as soon as you wake up, I need to fucking start figuring out how to stop this thing and change what's going on here so that we're not continually getting trapped in it.
Right. And then there's levels to it too, where you're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like wake up other people. And then you start to see, oh, well, when we wake up enough people, all these people, we all got to work together to actually prevent this stuff from happening.
If you wake up enough people, guess what happens when you get reborn?
They get you.
They help you wake up again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
assuming that happens.
Yeah.
Or if you don't think of it as yourself, what happens when the next generation of children are born?
Yeah.
They don't have to like go through this process of maybe waking up or not.
Right. Yeah, that's the term, the location point. It's like that's actually is every one of this group waking up to what is that point you play within this new system. And it will evolve over time, and you'll have certain skill sets, and you'll live in a certain place, and you'll have your pre-programming that you're working with and things that come more natural to you. But it's you living that full on. Like I love looking at what is full Mitchell, like what is me full on as life, right? What is full Drake? What is full Cameron? What's full Christine? And it's cool because like I look at Aristotle, our son, and he's already full Aristotle. It's like now just don't fuck it up, right? And of course, mentor him, support him, teach him, have him do the process. But it's so cool because now he doesn't have to just get fucked up by the system and get passed on to some daycare and then to some school. It's like he's gonna have it easier in a sense to just fully fucking crush it. And then his kids, like, man, like imagine when him and Caius and Hazel and all them are all hanging out when they're
See, and
10.
you can see even within that, and this is for everybody to realize in this group, is like if it's just okay, Mitch and Jess, you figured out how to parent Aristotle, and then he knows how to parent his kids, and then they know how to parent. That's not enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, we found this really cool secret formula to just be really awesome in this world. That it at a certain point it becomes irrelevant. It's just another fucking self-improvement thing. Like that's just for you. It's like that's not going to work. Like it has to be not only Aristotle, but then more people and then more people and then more people, because then it's like it's replicating this. It has to grow. It can't, it doesn't work if it's just you take it as your special thing and okay, well, I benefit. And it's like if you ever find yourself feeling like, well, I just don't know what to do next in my process, like that bullshit thing that comes up for people, it's like if you're not challenging yourself as how do I get more people to do this?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh, that sounds like a cult. You're just trying to get more people to do it. What does the system do automatically?
The recruit.
Right.
Like automatically you're born into it and you do it.
Yeah.
That's why it works.
Yeah.
If you were born and you knew everything up front and you could make the choice to participate or not, and the system was dependent upon everybody at every moment making that choice, would it continue?
No.
It would look very different.
It would not fucking continue. It relies on the fact that people, it's the automatic choice that's made before you even know. And that's that going back to that point about following.
Mm-hmm.
It's a choice that you made before you could even make a choice. This is why, as a parent, one of the primary responsibilities we have is to teach our kids how to make choices. It's like, yeah, okay, I get it. That seems like a fun thing for you to do, but you're only considering yourself. You're not considering anybody else. That doesn't mean you should subordinate yourself to it. It should be best for you too. But just because you like it, that's not the valid point. Just because it's like going back to the Harari point. just because it feels good or just because you feel like it matters, is that a valid way to run society?
No.
And it's interesting because his whole point is the fear that like we're creating these AIs which know how to manipulate our algorithm, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's only a problem if you can be manipulated.
Right.
And he's like, well, it's a danger to democracy. Do you think democracy exists? If you're just an algorithm and everyone's just an algorithm, what is democracy then? It's a
It's a,
foregone conclusion. Is it really a conversation?
right.
Like, and is everyone being manipulated in a democracy to like think certain? It's like they'll bring up the January 6th thing every time, and it's like you got manipulated into thinking that fucking thing actually is something that mattered.
Right. Yeah.
Like it wasn't a big spectacle.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like all these things, a pandemic, all these things are spectacles that manipulate democracy, that manipulate people, let people feel and think. A history book, all these things.
Yeah.
Right. So it has to change. We have to change ourselves. We have to support others to walk this process. It's not just a one person is the dictator and figures everything out. And it's not something that's going to happen automatically. The only thing that's going to happen automatically is everyone's going to be tricked into believing that you are literally a digital soul trapped in a body that needs to be uploaded to a machine. Like it sounds ridiculous, I know, but they wrote the books. They said it. This is the point of it. And then you listen to someone like Peter Diamandis, and he's like, we can live forever. AI is going to enable us to upload ourselves to the cloud. And I'm like, how can you be so smart and so stupid at the same time? And I'm not some religious person being like, no, but we have a soul ordained by Jesus. Like any of the arguments you could use against, like kind of like the point with the gay stuff, any of the arguments you try to use against ain't going to work on me because I'm not participating in that shit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's natural or not natural. I'm not saying like fucking hurricanes are natural. Does that mean I want to fucking die in one? Like, no. Like, if it's natural, then fucking it's natural for some people to be serial killers. Why are you putting them in jail? Like, what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah.
Also, the Holocaust was natural, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do you fucking draw the line at what's good or bad then? If you're just saying it's not, everything is natural if it occurs.
Yeah.
There has to be some guiding principle. That's the whole. So, like, when you talk about these principles, people are like, what? Why do you care about that? It's like, this has to be the guiding point that people accept because you understand it, not because you're forced to. When a child accepts religion and the precepts of a religion, it's before they can choose it.
Right.
Now, when an adult does it, you think, well, but they're able to choose it, right? No, because they're still just doing it based on feelings of avoiding pain or pleasure or seeking pleasure. They're not there. It's algorithmic. It's a stimulated response. It's not them actually understanding it because they'll always give you at the end of the day, a emotional reason as to why they believe.
Yeah.
It's never because, look, let me work out to you mathematically, like why reasonably this is the solution to reality. It's always an emotional point. And it was because of some trauma that occurred in childhood. So if you were Muslim and then you convert to Christianity, it's not because you found the truth. It's because you're reacting to some trauma that you associate with the other thing and some feeling of pleasure and joy that you're associating with this thing. It's not because there's any reality to it.
Yeah.
So I know we're close to the time we wanted to stop, so I'll let you guys.
Hey, Drake, well, here, I'll give a little public announcement for again the hotel. Get your hotel ticket. It's 95% booked up, or to your hotel reservation, right? You don't have to pay till checkout. And get your +1. Like Christine made this really cool flyer to just really summarize the point of how cool is it when you can bring more people. I mean, shout out to like Abel and Nina. Remember that last year, Drake? How you helped get them there, and now look at them.
Oh yeah.
Even someone else we talked about this Friday. Someone else I will keep it vague because of just respect to their privacy. But he was someone where last year he was like wanting to have kids, but not really, unsure on the point. Helped him make the decision, and now he's got a kid on the way.
That's
It's
awesome.
like really like that is legacy changing stuff. That's what this is about. So yeah, Drake, how about you close it out with that quote? You got that quote?
Yeah. This is the quote you were mentioning, right, Kim?
Yeah.
You do have the power to change this in the physical world, to accept the gift that Earth offers you to work with in space and time and assess consequence, to see where you must change to produce a consequence that's best for you and all life always. That is the purpose. That is the answer. That is the reason for your being. tongue got a little stuck there.
That's it though, right there.
Sums it up. All right. See you next time.
Great.
Bye, everybody.